Chapter 369. Reinforcements? Where did the reinforcements come from? Huang Yuliang was confused at first. Then he seemed to have thought of something and said in realization, "Are you talking about the imperial envoy in Jiangxi's Guangzhou?" "Yes." Geng Jun nodded. "Haha them? Didn't the news say that they had been hiding in Guangzhou and were afraid to advance? How could they be here for reinforcements? Did Ma Wei's head get kicked by a donkey?" Huang Yuliang laughed loudly. When he talked about Yang Qindong, his face was full of confidence. In his opinion, the imperial envoy and the Duke of Loyalty and Courage, who was called the God of War, were all jokes that were made up by others. Otherwise, why would they stay in Guangzhou and not dare to come out? In the end, they were still afraid of him. Huang Yuliang was still laughing, but Geng Jun said with a serious face, "Young master, there is news that they have already left Guangzhou and are coming here." The laughter suddenly stopped, and Huang Yuliang's expression became more serious. "What? They have already left? Where are they? How many soldiers and horses are there? The news says that there are more than 2,000 of them. As for where they are, there is no news yet." When Geng Jun said this, his expression was no longer as serious as before. Instead, there was a slight smile on his face, and if one looked closely, there was even a hint of mockery. What do you mean?" Huang Yuliang was confused. "General Geng, you're probably saying that although they came from Guangzhou, there are only 2,000 of them. They knew that they wouldn't be able to solve the crisis of Guangzhou Prefecture, so they simply ran away." A young general stood out from the crowd. This person's name was Zhu Fangyong, and he was a force that joined the Huang bandit army later on. He had more than 1,000 young and strong men under his command. He had contributed greatly when they attacked Zhaoqing Prefecture, and was given the title of general by Huang Yuliang. When Zhu Fangyong said this, Huang Yuliang's laughter sounded again. "That's right, General Zhu is right. They only have 2,000 people, and they want to be enemies with our 80,000 strong army? What a joke. I'm afraid they also know the danger and escaped without a trace." Ha ha ha. Laughter and mockery rang out in the tent. It was clear that everyone had accepted this fact. After the laughter subsided, Huang Yuliang's smile disappeared. "Since there are no reinforcements, what is Ma Wei waiting for? Who can tell me?" In the face of Huang Yuliang's question, everyone who was originally laughing didn't know what to say for a while, so they simply shut their mouths. In any case, they only cared about fighting. Whenever they had the chance, they would take advantage of the situation. Once they entered the city, they would naturally gain unlimited benefits. No one spoke. Zhu Fangyong, the young general from before, stood up and said, "Young master, from what I see, we probably already know about this news, but Ma Wei doesn't know about it yet. Once he knows about it, he won't be so determined to defend the city. By then, he might abandon Guangzhou Prefecture and leave. Our chance will naturally come." "You're right, but General Zhu, how can we let Ma Wei know that the reinforcements won't be coming?" Huang Yuliang nodded in agreement. However, he still had a headache on how to solve this problem. "Why don't we send someone to talk to Ma Wei in the Guangzhou government?" Geng Jun interjected. "No." Zhu Fangyong directly rejected the suggestion and shook his head. "With our current hostile relationship, even if we say it, I'm afraid they won't believe us. On the contrary, it will weaken our morale." Geng Jun was naturally unhappy that someone dared to reject his suggestion. His tone became a little harsh as he asked, "Since this method is not feasible, I wonder if General Zhu has any better ideas?" It's not that there isn't a way, but I'm afraid it will require General Geng's cooperation." Unexpectedly, Zhu Fangyong actually acted as if he had a solution. "How do we cooperate?" Geng Jun, who was called out, asked in return. Not only him, but Huang Yuliang and the others were also staring at Zhu Fangyong. "It's not difficult." Zhu Fangyong answered straightforwardly. Then he strode to the map hanging in the tent and pointed in the direction of Gan province behind their army. He said, "Since Ma Wei is waiting for reinforcements, we can use this as an excuse to lure him to attack first." "How do we attack first?" Huang Yuliang asked with interest. "Let them pretend that reinforcements are coming. For example, we can send out a small group of people to disguise themselves as the Southern Ming Empire's reinforcements. Then, General Gungjun will lead the troops to resist and retreat while fighting. This will give the impression that our military camp is in chaos. In this way, Ma Wei and the Guangzhou prefecture will definitely fall for the trap and may come out of the city to provide reinforcements. At that time, we only need to find an opportunity to kill our way into the city. Then we will succeed. Zhu Fengyong explained his plan in one breath. Then he stood to the side and did not say much, as if he was waiting for everyone to agree with him. After he finished speaking, the tent was silent for a moment. Then Huang Yuliang's eyes lit up. He slapped his thigh and said, "The plan is feasible. However, I don't know why General Gung has to lead the troops. Can't we choose someone else?" "Someone else can too. However, since it is a fake defeat, we have to make it seem real. When the time comes, it is inevitable that they will set fire to the camp to create momentum. If it were someone else, the army might really be frightened by this battle formation. And there might even be side issues that might arise. Only General Gung is strict in managing the army. If he leads the troops, he will be able to reverse the situation at any time and reduce the losses to the minimum. This is the most perfect plan. Of course, this is only a suggestion. As for how to execute it, it will be up to young master and General Gung to decide." Zhu Fengyong spoke in a very measured manner. His actions did not cause anyone to feel the slightest bit of disgust. Even Gung Jun, who was called out, had a red glow on his face at this moment. He seemed to be enjoying the praise of his strict management of the army. "Yes, I think so. General Gung, what do you think?" Huang Yuliang nodded in approval. After fully understanding Zhu Fengyong's plan, he had already agreed. He then asked Gung Jun, the person in charge of the plan. How could Gung Jun be afraid when he was valued so highly and faked his defeat? All he had to do was put on a show and he would be able to earn a great merit. This was something that any general among the Yellow Bandits would be willing to do. He immediately nodded in agreement. Since this is the case, this general will make a trip. Good. Since this is the case, there is no time to lose. Immediately make preparations. We will carry out the fake defeat this evening. Huang Yuliang saw that Gung Jun did not decline and was overjoyed. He immediately made the final decision. The reason why they chose to carry it out at night was because the darkness would block people's vision and make it easier to carry out the plan smoothly. On the Guangzhou City Gate Tower, Ma Wei, dressed in armor and covered in a bloody aura, stood there like a statue. It had already been 8 days. He had defended the city to the death with less than 6,000 soldiers. He felt both mentally and physically exhausted. As one of the 13 guards of the Great Ming Dynasty and the commander of the Guangdong Guards, Ma Wei had truly done his best this time. Even in his military career, the danger of this battle could be ranked at the top. A third of his 6 soldiers had died and a third were injured. Now there were less than 2,000 people who could stand on the city gate tower and continue to fight. Among them were many bailiffs and constables from the Guangzhou City Yamen. Even so, he did not show the slightest intention of abandoning the city. Ma Wei's actions, in the eyes of the other Great Ming soldiers, were like the actions of a man of steel. He was like an existence that stabilized the sea. It was because of his perseverance that the Yellow Bandits were able to break through the city walls a few times, but were still forced down in the end. 2 more days, Ma Wei muttered as he stood on the city gate tower. At this moment, no one knew that this iron-blooded general in everyone's eyes was thinking about the parting words the imperial envoy had said to him when he had just left the Guangzhou city. "Let me tell you, Ma Wei, this imperial envoy does not care what kind of backing you have or what kind of power you have. The Guangzhou city must hold on for 10 days. If you do it, even if you lose the city in the end, you will not be blamed. Otherwise, just wait for your head to be chopped off. When that time comes, the imperial sword will chop down. The people you rely on will be like distant water that cannot quench the immediate thirst. When you lose your life, you will have nothing left." This was how Yang Chendong threatened him. With the example of Jia Ping being beheaded, Ma Wei had no choice but to lower his head. In order to protect his own life, defending the Guangzhou city for 10 days became Ma Wei's goal. Now that he had defended for 8 days, he was not far from completing his mission. If he held on for 2 more days, he would be able to protect his life. If he really lost the city, Others would blame him. Ma Wei was still thinking about how to save his life. What he did not know was that outside the Guangzhou city, behind the Yellow Bandits' army, the true reinforcements, the imperial envoy who had given him a death order, Yang Chendong, had rushed over with his army. After several days of rapid marching, on the 8th day of the Guangzhou city battle, Yang Chendong had arrived with his men. The plan was one day faster than before. Being able to walk 800 miles in 3 days was, of course, due to Yang Chendong's role model. When the order was passed down that the auxiliary soldiers who performed well in this battle would be given priority to enter the cold front, the 800 auxiliary soldiers seemed to have changed into another person. It was not an exaggeration to say that their footsteps were as fast as flying. The auxiliary soldiers were working so hard and risking their lives that even the cold front in front of them was under great pressure. They could not be overtaken by the auxiliary soldiers. Otherwise, it would be a blatant slap in the face. In order to fight for this honor and for the glory of the cold front, they began to speed up as if their lives depended on it. Chapter 370. As the leader of the army, Yang Chendong could feel the changes and quickened his pace. Everyone was chasing after each other. In the end, the formation was messed up. The cold vanguard soldiers and the auxiliary soldiers walked together. It was truly a case of you and me, and you and me, and you and me. Even General Guaning, who was in charge of the food supply behind him, was shocked speechless by the sudden increase in speed. He rode a horse to deliver the food that was prepared by the people behind him. Even so, it took him a long time to catch sight of the auxiliary soldiers at the back. By the time he caught up with Yang Chendong's main force, they were already not far from the Guangzhou government. Seeing that they had traveled more than 300 miles in one day, he was truly impressed. Guaning had never seen a mercenary army that could fight a war. However, in terms of marching speed, no Ming army in the world would be a match for them. After a full meal, it was another few hours of rapid marching. The vanguard could already see the Yellow Bandits' main camp. When they arrived, Yang Chendong ordered the entire army to rest and conserve their energy for the next battle. Although he said that it was the entire army, there were less than 800 men who could persevere and follow him to the destination. Almost half of the auxiliary soldiers had fallen behind. The original 800 men had been reduced to 400 men. On the other hand, the Cold Vanguard battalion of 400 men had persevered until now and did not fall behind. From this, it could be seen that the Cold Vanguard was indeed the Cold Vanguard. It was no wonder that they were called the most elite army in the world. It was worth mentioning that some of the auxiliary soldiers had outstanding performances this time. For example, there was a soldier named Peng Yu. He was only 17 years old, and had only been in the army for half a year. However, this time he managed to walk in front of many of the Cold Vanguard soldiers. He was even less than 30 meters away from Yang Chendong. It was learned that Peng Yu was originally a hunter in the mountains. What he did most since he was young was to chase the wild beasts on Little Colored Glass Island. After that, a large number of Lungfeng came to his hometown. No matter how hard they worked, they could not get enough food and clothes to wear. His father, mother, and even a few of his sisters had all gone to work in the factories in Crimson City. Every single one of them would be able to fork out a sizable sum of money at the end of the month. As the only son in the family, he was filled with envy, but at the same time, he was also filled with hope for a beautiful future. Especially when his parents and sisters returned home after work, they would tell him about the beauty of Resin City, the variety of new things, the fairness and harmony between people, and so on. All of these made him curious and yearn for it. Peng Yu, who couldn't stay in the first place, decided to go to Crimson City as well. Moreover, he chose to join the army. This was because he had heard from his sister more than once that there was a team called the Cold Front there. Every one of them was very powerful. This made Peng Yu, who had never been willing to submit to anyone since he was young, greatly yearn for it. He believed that was where the strong resided, and where he should be. In order to join the army, Peng Yu had thought of some excuses. He knew that as the only son in the family, his parents, especially his mother, would have a hard time convincing him. In the past, the Shang Dynasty had recruited soldiers more than once, but his parents had hidden him away. From this point he could tell their attitudes. To Peng Yu's surprise, when he told his parents that he wanted to join the army, especially the cold front, no one objected. His mother only muttered to herself for a while before encouraging him. "All right, are you, or as a responsible man? Then go. Since you're going, do your best and work hard to protect the beautiful life we have now. Mother looks forward to the day you become a true cold front soldier." His mother's attitude was so good that it made Peng Yu feel that it was unreal. Of course, he didn't know that his mother, who worked in Crimson City, had long been changed by the environment. Especially the publicity team in the city, they would often come out to perform for them. They would also paint slogans on the walls, telling them that a beautiful life came from having strong self-defense skills. They wanted their son to join the cold front and become a true warrior. It was a glorious thing to become a true man. In his mother's factory, there were two mothers whose sons joined the army. One joined the Cold Vanguard, and the other became an auxiliary soldier. However, even the mother of the latter held her head high wherever she went with a proud look on her face. Everyone had the desire to compare themselves to others. Peng Yu's mother was naturally envious of her son, especially when she knew that once he joined the army, his treatment would be much better than the sum of their family's income. Moreover, it was glorious for a family to join the army. All these feelings of glory had made her hesitate for a long time, and she was hesitant to let her son join the army. Now that Peng Yu finally brought it up, as his mother, she also felt relieved. An eagle should be released into the sky. Her son had grown up, so it was time for him to go out and explore the world. Thus, Peng Yu signed up and went through the political process. Under the guarantee of his family and neighbors, he became an honorable auxiliary soldier. For outstanding men, being an auxiliary soldier was naturally not their goal. Peng Yu had his eyes on the cold front, because they were the only ones who could wear the most handsome military uniform and hold the most advanced firearms. Every time such a person appeared in Crimson City, everyone's gaze would involuntarily fall on him. In particular, the eyes of many unmarried ladies would shine as if they had seen a rare treasure. They couldn't help but like him. All of this made Peng Yu even more determined towards his goal. Becoming a true cold front soldier had become his greatest ambition. This time, when Crimson City sent troops to the southern lands of Great Ming, the news that they needed 2,000 auxiliary soldiers spread out. Every single one of them became very valuable. Peng Yu himself had only been in the army for half a year after defeating 6 people in a row on the martial arts field, and had obtained this precious quota. Speaking of which, this was also a display of fairness in Crimson City. As long as you had the ability, you didn't need any qualifications to get a chance to perform. After Peng Yu participated in the battle as an auxiliary soldier, this was the first time he saw Yang Chendong. Although he only saw him from afar, as a hunter who was extremely observant, he still felt that something was different. For example, he saw that when the regiment, battalion and company of the auxiliary soldiers saw the green-clothed young master, their faces were filled with excitement and respect. Even the cold front soldiers, who were usually the most mysterious and aloof in their eyes, had a respectful attitude at this moment. This feeling told him that this young master was not simple, because even in the entire Crimson City, there were only a handful of people who could make these officers bow their heads, and there was actually one here. After careful observation, Peng Yu only felt that this young master was not simple. All of this came from the orders given by the higher-ups. It was said that the young master had said that whoever performed better in this rapid march would be able to undergo an assessment when they joined the Cold Vanguard in the future. When the order was given, Peng Yu was truly excited. Although he hadn't been in the auxiliary army for long, he was observant enough to find out some things. For example, the Cold Front's assessment was done according to the principle of first come, first served. There would be a few assessments every year, but it was also done according to the order of registration. For example, if he wanted to qualify for the assessment, he would have to wait until next year. Because of this, he had been vexed and regretted that he joined the army too late. But now, the problem was about to be solved. From the moment he received the order, Peng Yu set a goal for himself. He had to perform well and successfully obtain the quota to enter the cold front. Throughout the journey, he had always been at the front of the auxiliary army, Later on, in order to create competition, Yang Chendong allowed the Cold Front and the auxiliary army to be mixed up. Everyone would have to rely on their own abilities and speed. Peng Yu even took the lead and overtook many veteran members of the Cold Front to arrive behind Yang Chendong. However, this distance of tens of meters was a challenge for Peng Yu. He had always thought that his leg strength would not be worse than anyone else's since he had been walking in the mountains since he was young. However, when he could only follow Yang Chendong's back, he finally understood what it meant to say that there would always be someone stronger than him. Furthermore, there was more than one person in the group. Not a single person was left behind by the green-robed young master's side. He knew clearly how powerful this group was. Perhaps these people were even more powerful than some of the members of the Cold Vanguard group. With this understanding, the group finally arrived at the resting point. Finally, they could rest. Everyone was able to eat a peaceful meal. Then, a strong sense of exhaustion came over them. Soon everyone fell asleep. Peng Yu was also very tired. Although his leg strength was stronger than most people, it did not mean that he did not know how to feel tired. He did not know how many hours had passed until the squad leader nudged him. Peng Yu, get up quickly. Check your equipment and prepare for battle. Peng Yu, who had not fully woken up, was instantly excited when he heard the squad leader's words. After joining the auxiliary army, other than training, he had never really fought with an opponent. More than once, he had thought about what it would be like when war broke out. How cruel and bloody would it be? How different would it be from the military exercises they usually conducted? Fortunately, he had fought with all kinds of beasts since he was young and had seen the blood of countless beasts, so he was not afraid. On the contrary, he was slightly excited. While the other comrades were being woken up one by one, Peng Yu took this opportunity to search for the green-robed young master's silhouette. With his sharp eyesight, he could see very far even in the dark. Not to mention that he actually found Yang Chendong. It was still a faint shadow from afar. What he saw was Yang Chendong talking to a group of young officers around him. From time to time, he could also see the officers who were usually required to salute when they met nodding their heads. Chapter 371. He should be the commander-in-chief. He's so powerful at such a young age. Who is he? Peng Yu was even more confused about Yang Chendong's mysterious identity. Yang Chendong was indeed surrounded by a few officers. He was currently announcing the battle plan to everyone. Heroes, it's time for you to show off your skills. After a few days of rapid marching, the enemy doesn't know that we're already behind them. This is the foundation and preparation for our surprise attack. Next, we'll give them a good stab in the ass and let them feel the pain in their hearts. Yes, sir. Hearing that the battle was finally about to begin, the officers were eager to give it a try. Originally, when they set out from Crimson City, they already knew that there would be a battle. In order to get a spot in the battle, who knows how many people's heads were broken in private? Only then did they have the chance to shine. Seeing that everyone was excited, Yang Chendong nodded in satisfaction. This was the face of an army of tigers and wolves. If everyone's legs trembled and their bodies went limp at the mention of war, such an army would never be able to win a battle. Alright, now I'll announce the battle plan. In a while, there will be 3 signal flares in the air. That's the signal to launch the final attack. At that time, everyone will attack from all sides. Everyone will be like a steel knife stabbing into the enemy's heart. Cold Front Company 1 and Auxiliary Company 1 will attack from the left flank. Cold Front Company 2 and Auxiliary Company 2 will attack from the right flank. Cold Front Company 3 and Auxiliary Company 3 will attack from the middle. The other 2 companies will wait for an opportunity to react to any unexpected situations. Once the attack is successful, the 8 companies in total can attack on their own. When the time comes, platoons will be the attack unit. Remember, this time the enemy is large in numbers. Do not act on your own accord. If anyone wants to be a hero, even if they have made a contribution this time, they will still be held accountable for their mistakes. You must make this clear to the soldiers below. Obey orders, obey orders. This is the first lesson for all Cold Front and Auxiliary Company soldiers. 6th Young Master, please rest assured. No one will dare to disobey orders. Cold Front Company 2's Commander Luo Po was the first to express his stance. Yes, we will not disappoint the sixth young master. Lu Jua, the commander of the auxiliary troops, also expressed his attitude. Very good. Everyone go back and prepare. Remember, no one is to act rashly without orders. Also, no one is to stand out. If the army is exposed because of a single person, they will be punished according to military law, Yang Chendong said with a serious face. At the same time, he was a little excited. Speaking of which, this was his first battle in this world. Although there were only 800 soldiers, it was enough for him. The sky had already darkened. The Huang bandits began to move. According to the plan, a small group of bandits would leave the barracks and head to the rear. Then General Geng Jun would lead his men to make preparations. A total of 5,000 elite soldiers were going to put on a show for General Ma Wei, who was guarding the Guangzhou prefecture. Whether or not they could take over the Guangzhou prefecture tonight would depend entirely on his performance. The high-spirited heavenly king Geng Jun mounted his warhorse. He wore the shiny armor that he seized. Coupled with his tall body, he looked even more majestic. At this moment he was waiting for the so-called reinforcements to send the signal. Then he would first lose and then win. Under Geng Jun's anticipation and Huang Yuliang's anticipation, 1,000 Huang bandits disguised as the Southern Ming reinforcements walked up a hill behind them. According to the previous plan, they needed to rush down the hill with torches. They would take the lead to defeat Geng Jun's troops and create the impression that the Southern Ming reinforcements had won. This way, Ma Wei and the city would be fooled. When they left the city to attack, the Huang bandits would take the opportunity to enter the city and take over the Guangzhou prefecture. The fake reinforcements came up the hillside step by step. In order to hide their strategic goal, they didn't even light torches. As a result, there were always people bumping into each other in the dark and getting some minor injuries, which led to waves of curses. They're here. Yang Chendong was on the hill. When he saw the bandits rushing over, he knew that Zhu Fangyong's plan had worked. At this point, everyone could definitely see that Zhu Fangyong was a spy that Yang Chendong had planted among the Huang bandits. The original plan was to convince Huang Yuliang to join them. Otherwise, if it didn't work, then they could only attack by force. At that time, with the advanced firearms, they would not be at a disadvantage. The bandits coming up the hill was enough to show that Zhu Fangyong's plan had worked. Since the plan to beat them at their own game had worked, Yang Chendong did not hold back anymore. He knew that the opportunity was here. He immediately ordered Tiger's Mane, who was lying on the ground, send the signal flare. Everyone attack. Pung pung pung. 3 different colored signal flare flew into the sky. At this moment, not only did the 800 Yang soldiers on the hill see it clearly, even General Ma Wei, who was on the Guangzhou prefecture's city wall, saw it clearly. 3 flares. The moment he saw the signal flare into the sky, Ma Wei became excited. This was the signal that Yang Chendong had discussed with him. Once they saw the 3 flares in the sky, it meant that the Southern Ming reinforcements had arrived. For safety reasons, Ma Wei did not immediately give the order to attack. Instead, he told the deputy general to gather the troops. Then he stood on the city wall and closely observed the movements of the bandits below. At the same time, Huang Yuliang also saw the 3 flares. A bad feeling crept into his heart. He was very clear that his army did not have such a weapon. What did it mean? Who fired it? What did it mean? The main force of the Southern Ming army was surrounded in the Guangzhou prefecture and could not come out. There were also no scouts who reported that the Southern Ming reinforcements had arrived. Who was the one who made such a commotion? Of course, Huang Yuliang didn't know that the scouts he sent out were all wiped out by the Yang faction's new army, abbreviated as Yang Army or Yang Family Army. With firearms that could take a person's life from a few hundred feet away and telescopes that could see very far, how could the scouts of the bandits be a match for them? Often, they did not even see their opponents before they were killed by bullets that came from God knows where. Huang Yuliang did not know what was going on. The Alliance army also did not know what was going on. He was also confused by the 3 flares. However, along the way, his pride of not meeting any opponents made him not take any precautions. Instead, he was still waiting for the fake Southern Ming reinforcements to appear so that he could lead his troops to retreat and pretend that they were not a match. After the 3 flares were fired, 3 companies of the Cold Vanguard and 3 auxiliary troops charged out like wild horses. They jumped out of the trenches and charged towards the Huang bandits that were climbing up the mountain. Looking down from above, they were like a hot knife through butter. In addition, they suddenly appeared and caught the enemy off guard. Before the 1,000 Huang bandits could react, arrows flew over like rain. This was the equipment of the auxiliary troops and not the Cold Vanguard. Unless there were special circumstances, they would not use advanced firearms. As such, they could only use crossbows. Fortunately, crossbows were made in the arsenal of Crimson City. In terms of range and accuracy, they were very advanced. The arrows flew over, accompanied by the sound of gunfire. The elite Cold Vanguard finally launched their attack. Under such an attack, most of the Huang bandits did not even see who their opponents were before they fell to the ground dead. The remaining bandits who were lucky enough not to be killed immediately collapsed in an instant. On the battlefield, when the death rate exceeded 20%, there would be signs of collapse. Elite troops would also not exceed 30%. Once this happened, the bandits threw down 300 to 400 corpses. This had already exceeded the maximum ratio of 30%. How could they not collapse? They turned around and ran. At this moment, the bandits who hated their parents for not giving birth to them scrambled down the mountain. Behind them, the distance between the Cold Vanguard and the auxiliary troops was getting closer and closer. For example, the Yang family army had never slacked off in their night training. This caused everyone to be used to the darkness. Even without using torches, they could clearly see the situation outside and make the most appropriate actions. With night vision, they already had a natural advantage. Adding on the sudden attack and the fact that most of the weapons in their hands were long-range weapons, how could these bandits who were only here to fill their stomachs be compared to them? In just one exchange, they had already established the foundation for victory. One chasing and one escaping unfolded on the mountain slope. Very quickly, it affected the Gung army who was waiting at the foot of the mountain. According to the plan, once they were ambushed, they should pretend that they were not a match for the enemy and run away. In fact, the bigger the commotion, the better. Only then would it be more realistic. Thus, when someone saw a figure rushing down the mountain, they turned around and ran. They did not make any movements to resist. Among the troops, Gung Jun commanded the army to retreat in an orderly manner while cursing. What the hell is going on? Why didn't they light a torch for a sneak attack? How could they let Ma Wei fall for their trap? General, why don't we shout and shout? This way, we won't be afraid that the Southern Ming army on the city wall will fall for our trap. One of his subordinates suggested. That's right. That's how it should be. Gung Jun nodded in agreement. Soon after, he had someone announce his order loudly. He rode his warhorse and shouted, "Everyone, raise your torches and shout for this daddy. The louder you shout, the better." Gung Jun personally commanded the middle troops. "The shouts of Ming army's reinforcements are here, quickly run," were like echoes in the valley. Looking from afar, it really gave people the feeling that they had encountered a sneak attack. Caught off guard, the camp was in chaos. However, as the Yang family army rushed down the mountain, the chaos became more and more realistic. Under the protection of a few of his subordinates, Gung Jun commanded the soldiers under him to create a bigger commotion. Just as he was doing all this, a soldier who ran to his side suddenly fell to the ground. Along with the fall, there was a thick smell of blood that assaulted their noses. Chapter 372. As the leader of the 4 heavenly kings under Huang Yuliang, Gung Jun was someone who had fought on the battlefield before. He was also quite familiar with the aura of the human body. When he suddenly smelled this aura, his expression froze for a moment before he couldn't help but shout, "What are you doing? It's just an act. Who told you to really kill people?" Just as he finished speaking, the sound of firecrackers being set off rang out. Following this explosion, a personal guard who was standing beside him fell to the ground. He only twitched twice before blood seeped out from his chest. He was no longer breathing. "Ah, you dare to kill this daddy's personal guard?" All of you must die. Seeing the guard who had followed him for a long time die in front of him for no reason, Gung Jun couldn't help but shout in anger. General, the situation isn't right. The situation isn't right. A guard saw his companion being killed, and was also very surprised, but his mind was still clear. If it was only a bandit soldier being killed, it could be said that it was a misunderstanding. But now, even the general's personal guard was killed. This was no longer something that could be casually explained with words. Gung Jun naturally felt that the situation wasn't right. They didn't light the torches as planned and rushed down much earlier than planned. What was worse was that the speed of the so-called Southern Ming reinforcements rushing down the mountain was too fast. It was so fast that it seemed like they were going to put their lives on the line. Looking at all these, it didn't seem like an act. As for the reason, Gung Jun didn't know for a moment. However, he had fought with the Southern Ming army several times and concluded a good experience. That was, if the situation wasn't right, escape was the best strategy. Retreat. Quickly retreat with this general. Feeling that the situation was out of his control, Gung Jun felt that his life was in danger. He immediately made the decision to retreat from the battlefield. He had a warhorse under him and presumably, his escape speed would be faster than the others. Having a warhorse would indeed increase one's mobility on the battlefield, but at the same time, it would also make one an easy target in the eyes of others. This was because being able to ride a warhorse often meant that one's status was noble and different. Just like now, when Gung Jun shouted to retreat, he saw a black shadow suddenly fly up. Then he felt his right eye being hit by a punch. The intense pain caused him to fall from his horse. Then, while he was still angrily enduring the pain in his right eye, he felt his chest tighten, and the strength in his body dissipated. It was the feeling of a blade piercing into his body. Gung Jun had once been injured on the battlefield, and he had felt the same way back then. But this time, the feeling was deeper than the last time. The pain caused him to instantly widen his eyes. Then, in the span of a breath, his widened eyes began to blur. Then his pupils began to dilate. He could only exhale and no longer inhale. Among the people descending the mountain, Peng Yu's luck was not bad. He was assigned to the auxiliary company of the Middle Army. When the 3 signal flares flew into the air, he followed closely behind the Cold Vanguard Company and rushed out. When he was halfway up the hill, he overtook many of his comrades in the Cold Vanguard Company and rushed to the first echelon. Peng Yu had already made up his mind to perform meritorious deeds. Before the operation, he had already set a goal for himself, which was to kill a famous general among the Yellow Bandits. Only then could he prove that he was different from the others. He had great confidence in Lung Feng. This was the main reason why Peng Yu dared to make such a decision. With such a strong ally by his side, he did not have to worry about whether he would be surrounded if he charged into the enemy camp. Therefore, at this moment he used his fastest speed to catch up to the first batch of Lung Feng's troops. With such a good view, he saw Gung Jun riding on a horse and looking around. Peng Yu did not know Gung Jun's true identity. However, at first glance, his intuition told him that since Gung Jun could ride a horse, he was not a nameless person. It would not be wrong to kill such a person. With this thought, he gave up on the ordinary yellow bandits in front of him that he could easily kill. Instead, he quickly charged forward and arrived in front of Gung Jun, who was preparing to retreat. Thus, the scene just now occurred. Peng Yu used a short sword that he carried with him to stab into Gung Jun's chest. Blood flowed out and flowed all over his arm. He actually killed General Gung. Quickly kill him. The personal guards saw all of this. When they saw someone wearing a different uniform appear and their general being killed in front of them, how could they not understand that the enemy had arrived? Immediately, they yelled and charged over. Peng Yu, who was lying on the ground, saw the people charging at him with swords drawn. He instinctively let go of the short sword in his hand and raised his right foot to kick at Gung Jun's body. Using the force of the kick, he pushed out horizontally and dodged the swords that were slashing at him. When the attack failed, the personal guards followed. As Gung Jun's personal guards, if the general died and they still couldn't do anything, even if they returned to the camp, they would face heavy punishment and might even lose their lives. For the sake of their own survival, they had to kill this brat who came out of nowhere. He did not have the chance to stand up at all. A few swords slashed at him again. In a hurry, Peng Yu raised his right arm and fired a crossbow. The mechanism moved with a heavy spring, and the arrow that flew out hit the throat of a personal guard, killing another person. However, at the same time, a few swords were in front of him. The closest one was only an arm's length away from his chest. At this moment, Peng Yu's eyes were wide open. No one could be indifferent in the face of death. At this moment, the scene of the wild beast in the mountain being killed by him appeared in his mind. Bang, bang, bang. Suddenly several gunshots rang out. The bandits who were surrounding Peng Yu and were about to attack him fell to the ground. The pressure of death suddenly disappeared. A feeling of rebirth rushed into Peng Yu's heart. "Brother, are you okay?" A large hand reached over and was in front of Peng Yu. The person who came was the battalion commander of the 2nd Battalion of the 2nd Regiment of the Cold Front, Chen Bo. He was the one who saw the danger here. When he saw that someone seemed to be attacking an auxiliary soldier, he led a few other Cold Front soldiers to shoot and eliminate the enemy. Seeing that it was the elites of the Cold Front, Peng Yu knew that he was fine. He looked at the 2 bars and 1 star insignia on Chen Bo's shoulder. He immediately reached out his right hand to hold Chen Bo's hand, and stood up. "Thank you for your help, Chief. Peng Yu can't thank you enough. Battalion Commander, the enemy's leader, Gung Jun, is dead." At this moment, a Cold Front soldier's voice rang out. Then Gung Jun's still warm body was carried over. Before the battle, all the Cold Front soldiers saw the portraits of the important leaders of the Yellow Bandit Army. Naturally, this included the leader of the 4 Heavenly Kings, Gung Jun. That was how the Cold Front soldiers recognized him. When the body was brought in front of him, Chen Bo examined it carefully. It was indeed Gung Jun. He smiled and said to Peng Yu, "Your luck is not bad. You're even braver. You actually killed the leader of the 4 Heavenly Kings of the Yellow Bandit Army. Oh right, what's your name?" Peng Yu never thought that he would kill the leader of the 4 Heavenly Kings of the Yellow Bandit Army, Gung Jun. He only felt that his luck was not bad. His face was flushed with excitement as he said, "Reporting to Battalion Commander, I am from the 3rd Company of Auxiliary Soldiers. My name is Peng Yu." "Good Peng Yu. You've done a great service. I will report this matter to the higher-ups and record your merit. As for now, the battle is not over yet. You still have to fight bravely. You're quite skilled. Stay by my side for now. That way, we can look out for each other." Chen Bo looked at Peng Yu with satisfaction as he spoke in an appreciative and caring tone. "Yes, I will listen to Battalion Commander's orders." To be able to fight alongside Cold Front was his goal ever since he joined the army. Now that he could fulfill his wish, why would he reject it? Gung Jun was dead. Chen Bo chopped off Gung Jun's head and hung it on his spear. He seized his horse and began to run through the army. As he ran, he shouted to Cold Front beside him, "Gung Jun has been executed. If the rest of you don't surrender immediately, you will be spared from death. Those who resist will be killed. Gung Jun is dead. Those who surrender will live. Those who resist will die." Instantly, shouts rang out from all directions. These shouts were like waves that rushed outwards and quickly reached the ears of the Yellow Bandit soldiers. The 5,000 soldiers that were prepared here were just making a symbolic retreat. However, when they heard the shouts, especially when they saw Gung Jun's head beside the torch on the war horse, their minds went blank. Didn't they say that the retreat was an act to lure the Southern Ming army out of the city? Then why did General Gung Jun die? Wasn't this acting a little too realistic? Everyone's thoughts were in chaos. In addition to the sounds of crossbow arrows flying through the air, more and more Yellow Bandit soldiers were killed and fell to the ground. Under such a one-sided situation, some of the great Ming citizens who originally wanted to earn a living felt fear and terror. Thus, the first person to kneel and surrender was the first to do so. Everything was afraid of setting an example. Once the first person knelt and surrendered, there was soon a second and a third. The originally disorderly and untrained Yellow Bandit soldiers eventually fell one by one. Occasionally, there would be some who wanted to stand up and resist. However, as soon as they stood up, blood would splatter in front of their chests. After being hit by a bullet, they would fall to the ground and become corpses. When everyone realized that those who stood up would die, and those who knelt would live. No one dared to stand up. This resulted in a black mass of people kneeling on the ground. There were simply too many captives. There were at least 2,000 of them. Battalion Commander Chen Bo had no choice but to leave behind a squad of Cold Front and a platoon of auxiliary soldiers to watch over the captives. Then he led the other soldiers and charged towards the Yellow Bandit camp. Chapter 373. The same thing happened on the left and right wings. A large number of Yellow Bandit prisoners knelt on the ground. There were also some Lung Feng soldiers and auxiliary soldiers who continued to charge towards the main camp. Huang Yuliang was pacing back and forth in his tent. At this moment, his heart was burning with anxiety. The 3 flares in the sky made him feel that something was wrong. However, he still felt that it was a coincidence. After all, he did not receive any news about the arrival of the Southern Ming Empire's reinforcements. Furthermore, he still had 80,000 soldiers in his hands. Report. Just as Huang Yuliang was feeling uneasy, the curtains of the tent were pulled open, revealing Zhu Fangyong's face. General Zhu, how did it go? Huang Yuliang asked anxiously when he saw who it was. Young master, it's a mess. Everything is a mess. There are rumors that General Geng Jun was killed. The army is in a mess now. Zhu Fangyong said as he entered the tent. Geng Jun was killed. Hearing this news, Huang Yuliang shook his head instinctively. That's impossible. General Geng has 5,000 soldiers by his side. They are all elites. Furthermore, he was only in charge of pretending to retreat. How could anything happen to him? Zhu Fangyong naturally did not agree with Huang Yuliang's description of elites. Compared to the elite Lung Feng soldiers, these Yellow Bandit soldiers could not even compare to a single finger of the elite Lung Feng soldiers. However, Zhu Fangyong, who still had important responsibilities, had no choice but to suppress his thoughts. He said obediently, "Yes, General Geng is surrounded by elites. I believe that someone at the front lines must have spread the news. However, the army is in a mess now. I'm afraid that anything can happen. For your safety, I hope that young master can leave the tent first." Leave the main tent? Why? Huang Yuliang shook his head with a puzzled expression. He had 80,000 soldiers. Even if something happened, he still had the advantage. How could he retreat just because he encountered a problem? As if he knew that Huang Yuliang would do this, Zhu Fangyong shook his head and took 2 big steps forward. He said, "Young master, I'm sorry to offend you." Then he raised his right arm and slapped the back of Huang Yuliang's neck. Chen Bo and the others quickly rushed towards the Yellow Bandit army. Under the cover of the night, they weaved through the battlefield. Lung Feng and the auxiliary soldiers split into groups of 3 and 5. They shot and killed the enemies in front of them with their spears and crossbows while shouting, "Geng Jun is dead. Young Master Huang has escaped." This caused the Huang Bandit army to fall into chaos. Shouts rang out from all directions. Some of the leaders who believed in young Master Huang immediately led their men to find a path to escape. Some of the leaders who didn't believe in young Master Huang were killed by Lung Feng from a distance. Some of them went to the main tent and found that young Master Huang was indeed missing. Knowing that something was wrong, they decided to flee. In short, without a commanding general in the army, in a state of chaos, the untrained bandit army did not know the general, and the soldiers did not know the general. In a state of utter chaos, everyone only cared about running for their lives. How could they organize any decent counterattack? It was at this moment that the final straw that crushed the army appeared. General Ma Wei, who had been determined not to come out of the Guangzhou prefecture, led the remaining 2,000 men and charged out. The moment the Southern Ming army appeared, the bandit army became even more chaotic. Countless people trampled on each other, and groups of people knelt down and surrendered. Nanjing, the capital of the Southern Ming Dynasty. After a period of renovation, the palace that was originally here looked majestic. The newly renovated Political Affairs Hall became the place where Zhu Qizhen met the important officials. The sky was already bright. A few important officials arrived at the Political Affairs Hall early in the morning, each of them feeling uneasy. In the Southern Ming Dynasty, there was a large court session every 6 days and a small court session every 2 days. The so-called large court session was a court session that all officials of the fourth rank and above in the capital had to attend without any special reasons. At that time, everyone could report to the emperor any difficult matters that happened at hand for everyone to discuss and deal with. The small court session could only be attended by officials of the third and second rank and above. The purpose of the court session was to solve problems. Usually, when the matter was related to someone, that person would be summoned to the hall to meet the emperor. Yesterday was the day of the small court session, but before 5 o'clock in the morning, the eunuchs in the palace went to the various residences to summon them to meet the emperor in the palace. Under such an urgent situation, something important must have happened, causing the important officials to feel uneasy when they entered the political affairs hall. From the looks of it, the officials who attended the small court session were all ministers of the 6 ministries. With such a wide range of influence, it was no wonder that everyone felt uneasy. Some smart people had even guessed something. At this time, the only thing that could make the emperor so anxious was the war in the south. While everyone was guessing and worrying, footsteps came from outside the hall. Accompanied by head eunuch Chao Jixiang, Zhu Qizhen walked into the hall and sat down on the large chair that represented the emperor. After Zhu Qizhen sat down, the officials who came in response to the imperial edict knelt on the ground and said, "This official greets the emperor. May the emperor live for 10,000 years. You may rise." Zhu Qizhen's eyes were like torches as he scanned every important official. Then he said, "Chao Jixiang, quickly pass the 800 li letter that was received in the middle of the night for everyone to see." Yes. After Chao Jixiang agreed, he carried a wooden box and brought it to the Minister of Personnel Chen Sun. Even though the 6 ministries seemed to be equal, the Minister of Personnel had always been known as the heavenly official. This was because the appointment and dismissal of the officials in charge was determined by who was one level higher. Chen Sun himself had once been an important official in the cabinet. It was reasonable for him to be the first to know of the news. Chen Sun reached out and opened the wooden box. He took out the letter and quickly skimmed through it. Then he returned the letter with a serious expression. After him, the Minister of Revenue, Wang Zhua, and the others also read the 800 li urgent letter. Very quickly, everyone knew of the news in the letter. The hall became much quieter. This seemed to have become some kind of custom. Whenever something big happened, the officials would treat their words like gold. Perhaps they also knew that the more important the matter was, the more they could not easily express their opinions. Otherwise, if they said something wrong, a disaster could befall them. The officials did not say a word. After Zhu Qizhen read the letter, there was a hint of anger in his eyes. He hated the attitude of these important officials who usually spoke of protecting the country and the people. When it came to critical moments, they always protected themselves first, and never took the initiative to solve problems for the imperial family. However, the law could not punish the majority. He could not punish anyone just because the important officials did not express their opinions. Since they did not take the initiative to speak, he would call them out one by one. "My dear officials, you have all seen it. The situation in Yunnan is dangerous. The rebel Zhu Huili has received help from Jiaoji. The military commander Liang Luo has died on the battlefield. The situation is very dangerous. Governor Wang of Huguang has come to request for reinforcements. Does everyone have a plan?" The military commander Liang Luo could be considered someone who knew his troops well. However, he still died on the battlefield. This was beyond the expectations of all the officials. Now that the emperor asked for a plan, for a moment, everyone looked at each other. No one dared to say a word. Everyone understood the meaning of Zhu Qizhen's words. Governor Wang of Huguang had asked for reinforcements and good generals. The reinforcements were secondary. After knowing that Jiaoji had agreed to Zhu Huili sending troops, the southern Ming court had begun to mobilize the army. Now the preparations were more or less complete. The first batch of reinforcements was 50,000 people. Although the number of reinforcements might not reach the initial expectations, if they were used well, they could be of use. As long as the southern Ming had enough time to prepare, they could mobilize and recruit more soldiers. However, choosing the right general was the difficult matter. After the Great Ming had 3 emperors, Emperor Qingzu, Emperor Renzong, and Emperor Xuanzong, the country seemed to be very powerful. However, with the implementation of the strategy of emphasizing civil affairs and belittling military force, there were not many generals that could be used on the battlefield. After the Battle of Tumu Castle, many of the generals that could fight had died. In addition, the Great Ming was divided into the north and south. Now the number of good generals that Zhu Qizhen could use could be counted on one hand. It had already become a common practice on the battlefield to choose the right general before using the army. Without good generals, no matter how many soldiers were sent, it would be useless. However, how could good generals be the reign of the world that could fall at any time? They had to be experienced in battle. Moreover, only after 100 battles could a good general be produced. Looking at the southern Ming, it was clear that there were no such people. Of course, it was not that there were no generals that could be selected from among the lame. For example, the Minister of War, Kuang Yi, was a person who knew how to fight. However, he was indeed a bit old. He might not be able to withstand the bumpiness and fatigue of the battlefield. Secondly, he was currently in the process of reorganizing the various guard stations, and had discovered many problems. If he was transferred away at this time, it could easily cause internal instability. This could shake the foundation of the southern Ming, which was an even more frightening matter. If he could not use Kuang Yi, it would be difficult to choose a good general. This was the reason why Zhu Qizhen had summoned everyone. Zhu Qizhen could not think of any suitable candidates, so he called everyone and asked the important officials to recruit talents. However, this was also difficult for these important officials. Normally, it was easy to recommend someone to a civil official. Everyone would even scramble to arrange their own people. After all, they were governing a city and a region. Even if there were some mistakes, it would not affect the overall situation. At most, they would be labeled as ignorant. However, this was the battlefield. Now that the situation in Yunnan was so critical, if they were not successful in a battle, not only would they die on the battlefield, it could also directly shake the foundation of the southern Ming. This crime was not something that a single person could bear. Knowing the importance of this matter, no one dared to recommend a candidate. Each and every one of the officials pretended to be deaf and mute. As expected, no one was willing to share the burden of state affairs at this critical moment. While Zhu Qizhen was furious, his gaze fell on the Minister of Personnel, Chen Sun. Minister Chen, is there anyone suitable for the Ministry of Personnel that manages the country? Chapter 374. When his name was called, Chen Sun groaned inwardly. However, he knew that he could not run away from his duties. For this reason, he raised his head and said with a bitter expression, "Your Majesty, this subject is mainly responsible for the assessment and appointment of the officials in the various prefectures and the capital. As for the military, this subject is not involved in much and cannot think of a suitable candidate. However, this subject will go back and do a thorough investigation to see if there is anyone who can win the position of a good general." He didn't dare to push the responsibility away directly, but he did express his thoughts in his words. It could be summed up in one sentence. He knew about the transfer of civil officials, but when it came to military affairs, he knew very little. Humph. Zhu Qizhen snorted in displeasure when he knew that Chen Sun was trying to shirk his responsibility. His gaze then fell on the Minister of Revenue, Wang Zhua. Beloved official Wang, the Ministry of Revenue is in charge of the nation's finances, as well as the army's provisions and weapons. Do you have any outstanding candidates to recommend to me during the evaluation? Your Majesty, most of the soldiers in the army are the same. There is no one particularly outstanding. This subject really cannot think of anyone at the moment. Wang Zhua braced himself as he spoke. His intention was to tell Zhu Qizhen that he was only in charge of the finances and provisions. Recommending a good general was not part of his duties, so he would not have an answer. After two successive ministers found excuses, Zhu Qizhen angrily asked a few other ministers. However, he still did not get any answers. Finally, his gaze fell on the Minister of War, Kuang Yi. Beloved official Kuang, you are in charge of the Ministry of War. Do you have any suitable generals to recommend to me? Asking Kuang Yi was something that could not be helped. Originally, Zhu Qizhen knew that if there really was a suitable candidate, Kuang Yi would have stood up long ago. His lack of action meant that he had no one to recommend. However, at this point he could only try. Kuang Yi, who was asked this question, was much calmer than the other ministers. Replying to Your Majesty, the Ministry of War is currently conducting a self-inspection. For the time being, we haven't found anyone outstanding in leading troops. However, since Your Majesty has asked, this subject recommends the Duke of Loyalty and Courage. He is currently quelling a rebellion in Guangdong. Why not wait for him to resolve the matter there, and then transfer him to Yunnan to take charge? While Kuang Yi was still speaking, Zhu Qizhen's face was already red. He said angrily, "Enough." After interrupting Kuang Yi, Zhu Qizhen said angrily to Kuang Yi, "Do you know what Guaning, who you sent out to report the situation in Guangdong every day, said? Today is peaceful. The three armies have not moved. Everything is normal. This is Guan Ying's secret report, and it's the same sentence every day. We can even recite it by heart. Now you say that you want to place your hopes on the Duke of Loyalty and Courage. Do you know that you are talking without thinking? Yes, yes. How can Minister Kuang mention the Duke of Loyalty and Courage? The matter in Guangdong was caused by a group of bandits, and most of them were untrained rebels. They have no combat ability at all. The Duke of Loyalty and Courage, who is known as the God of War, fears the enemy like a tiger. If he is transferred to Yunnan, who knows how afraid he will be? It is better not to say such things in the future to avoid being ridiculed by others." The Minister of Rights, Lu De, stood up and spoke as if he was criticizing Yang Qindong for not doing his job well. Yang Qindong did not give face to Lu De because of the matter with Hangzhou's prefectural magistrate, Qi Bushen. Lu De held a grudge. After that, he tried to obstruct Yang Shan's diplomatic mission to northern Ming. However, things didn't go as he expected. He was called over by Zhu Qizhen and reprimanded. He had long been dissatisfied. Now even the emperor was scolding Yang Qindong for not doing his job well. How could he not put a foot in it? Towards the grudges between Lu De and Yang Qindong, Kuang Yi, who understood the grudges between Lu De and Yang Qindong well, naturally knew that the other side was venting his anger. Thus, he put on an expression of disagreement as he said, "The Duke of Loyalty and Courage indeed did not gain any merit, but the situation in Guangdong did not expand either. Besides, the situation on the battlefield is ever-changing. Not moving today does not mean not moving tomorrow. Who knows what the outcome will be? I have confidence in the Duke of Loyalty and Courage." "Is that so? Then I hope that Minister Kuang has a good eye for people. I also hope that the Duke of Baiming does not disappoint." Lu De knew very well that he didn't have much say in military matters. He had already expressed his opinion, so there was no need to make things difficult for Kuang Yi. Thus, he began to withdraw his hand. "Enough," Zhu Qizhen said angrily. Seeing that the officials had no good generals to recommend, and were instead arguing, he waved his hand. "Everyone, go back and think about the matter of generals. If there is a suitable candidate, I will not look at seniority and promote him." Even without looking at seniority, one could see Zhu Qizhen's anxiety. The officials all knelt on the ground and said that they would think about it carefully and choose a suitable candidate. The siege of Guangzhou had been resolved. Yang Qindong also met with the commander of the Guangdong Guards, General Ma Wei, at the foot of the city. However, information was not developed. It would take a few days for news of the battle here to reach Nanjing. General Ma Wei greets the imperial envoy. What was different from the last time they met was that Ma Wei's salute this time was very respectful. It could be seen that he was sincere. Although under the Ming Dynasty system, military officials were usually half a head lower than civil officials, as a rank 3 commander of the guards, his power was not small. At least in the entire Guangdong, the only person who could suppress him was the administrative secretary Lu Youfu. Even the original inspector Jia Qing only had a higher rank than him. Most of the time, the two of them were in different positions and did not need to lower their heads when they met. Now Ma Wei's respect for Yang Qindong was not only because of his identity as an imperial envoy, but more importantly because of the victory of this battle. Starting from the night, it did not end until noon of the second day. The yellow bandits were already defeated. Their leader, Huang Yuliang, escaped in the chaos. The leader of the 4 heavenly kings, Gung Jun, was killed in front of the formation. Other than that, more than 30 leaders were either killed, injured, or captured. In this battle, there were more than 30,000 prisoners. Adding those who died in the battle, especially those who trampled on each other in the chaos, there were close to 10,000 people. Thus, more than half of the original 80,000 yellow bandits were heavily injured. Not only did they lose the ability to surround the Guangzhou government, the rest of them had all escaped like stray dogs. This method came from Yang Chendong's hands. As a witness to the entire matter, how could Ma Wei not be convinced? As for the resentment of Yang Chendong ordering him to defend the Guangzhou government for 10 days and losing soldiers, he had long forgotten it completely. Ma Wei's face was full of acceptance. Yang Chendong did not find it strange and only replied lightly, "General Ma has contributed greatly in this battle. I will mention it in the following battle report. However, the battle is not over yet. The battlefield still needs to be cleaned up, and a large number of prisoners still need to be monitored. General Ma is more familiar with this place. As for how to mobilize the bailiffs and even the common people in the Guangzhou government to help, all of this will depend on you." Yang Chendong spoke politely and Ma Wei immediately agreed happily. "Please do not worry, Imperial Envoy. I will go to the city to mobilize soon. I think the manpower will be replenished very quickly." "Very good." Yang Chendong first nodded in satisfaction. Then he seemed to have thought of something and said, "Right, although we won this battle, we lost some men. In order to better attack the yellow bandits and achieve the goal of eliminating them, I suggest that we pick some strong men from these prisoners for our use. With enough soldiers, we can win consecutive battles and restore the stability of Guangdong." This was a commonly used method during the War of Liberation. This was also one of the reasons why our army was growing larger and larger, and why our victory was becoming more and more fruitful. Pick prisoners and replenish soldiers. Hearing this, Ma Wei raised his head in surprise. Clearly, this was something he had never thought of. Just as he was puzzled, General Guaning also rode over from not far away. However, when he was still a few dozen feet away from Yang Chendong, he reined in his horse and jumped off. Leading the horse in front of Yang Chendong was also a sign of respect. Speaking of which, the results of this battle shocked Guaning and made him truly convinced. Previously, when he wanted to compete in leg strength with Yang Chendong, he had lost. Guaning had a feeling that this young imperial envoy might be able to bring him a pleasant surprise. What he did not expect was that not only would there be a pleasant surprise, the results would be so great. In less than a day, they defeated the yellow bandits and severely damaged their foundation. Not only did they resolve the siege of Guangzhou Prefecture, there had long been news that the yellow bandits had retreated in the direction of Zhaoqing Prefecture. Once they entered the city, they holed up and tightly closed the city gates. It was clear that this battle had scared them out of their wits and greatly damaged their arrogance. After this battle, presumably, the situation in Guangdong would be greatly alleviated. Now that there was hope for his mission to be completed, Guaning walked over with a glowing face. When he saw Yang Chendong, his attitude was even more respectful. "Imperial Envoy, the food has been delivered. When do you think you can let the army eat?" "There is no rush for this matter." Yang Chendong looked at the approaching Guaning with a slight smile. He then pointed at Ma Wei and said, "Just now, I said that we do not have enough soldiers. I was wondering if we could pick some strong young men from the prisoners and temporarily send them to the army. However, it seems that General Ma does not agree." "No. I was only thinking that these people were originally yellow bandits. Even if they were captured because they were not a match for us, we do not know if they can truly be used by us. That is why I have some misgivings." Ma Wei saw that Yang Chendong seemed to be dissatisfied with him, and immediately opened his mouth to explain. In that way, he had completely regarded Yang Chendong as a superior. Chapter 375. This was the difference between a general and a civil official. If it was a civil official, even if you showed great talent, it would be hard for the other party to be convinced. Even if he was full of flattery on the surface, It was hard to tell whether or not he would hate him out of jealousy and secretly do bad things in the dark. A general was different. Often, the better the general was at war, the more straightforward his personality was. This kind of person would call himself a hero and value heroes more. Once he met someone who was more powerful than him, not only would he be convinced, but he would also feel a sense of appreciation for that person. At this time, the only difference between the two was the difference in the master he served. Today, Ma Wei admired and respected Yang Qindong. Hearing him say that he did not support the idea of using captives as soldiers, he had to explain. Using captives as soldiers? Guanning was shocked when he heard this. Obviously, he had never thought of this idea before, and was caught off guard. Yes, you can say that it's using captives as soldiers. Yang Qindong saw that the two of them didn't understand, so he explained, the two of you, to be honest, with the amount of military power we have, it's really impossible for us to really quell the yellow bandits. If the other party only retreated and defended the city, with our little military power, we will not be able to display any advantage. This time we were able to win, but one was fast and the other was strange. But what if the other party is prepared? Yang Qindong looked at Guanyin and Ma Wei and continued. If they are prepared, the lack of military power is our weakness. They only need to fight a war of attrition with us. Even if they use 10 people to exchange for one of our lives, I'm afraid we can't afford it. There was no need for Yang Qindong to explain the weakness of having too little military power. Guanyin and Ma Wei could see it clearly. But what could they do? They had transferred all the soldiers they could from Guangdong. Now they did not have any extra power to fight a decisive battle with the yellow bandits. However, Yang Qindong's idea was not bad. If they could really use it, it would be a good way to expand their strength. At the very least, it would be a good way to protect themselves. However, using prisoners of war as soldiers was unprecedented in the Ming Dynasty. This made things difficult for Guanyin and Ma Wei. Seeing that the two of them only lowered their heads and didn't say anything, neither agreeing nor disagreeing, Yang Qindong chuckled. Forget it, I won't make things difficult for you. Presumably, the two of you know that as an imperial envoy, I have the authority to use some battlefield resources. Since this is the case, these people have been temporarily recruited by me. In the future, you can write in detail in the battle reports. All the blame will be shouldered by this imperial envoy. It has nothing to do with you two. You can put your hearts into your stomachs. As soon as Yang Qindong said this, Guanyin and Ma Wei heaved a sigh of relief as if a heavy burden had been lifted from their shoulders. Although the emperor's decree did not explicitly state that Yang Qindong could use all the resources on the battlefield, but this time, the mercenaries were hired without any payment. For this reason, there was indeed news from the higher-ups that in order to make up for the Duke of Loyalty, he did indeed have the right to share the battlefield resources. Just like how he punished Lady Jia and Han Qing before, it was clear proof. Since he had this kind of power and prisoners of war were also a type of battlefield resource, it was possible for him to use this as an excuse to use prisoners of war as soldiers. Since they had no right to object, if anything happened in the future, it would have nothing to do with them. How could they not let out a sigh of relief? Since the imperial envoy has said so, then let's do as you have said. However, I still want to remind you that no matter how brave and loyal the prisoners of war are, their loyalty is always very little. You still need to be on guard at all times, Ma Wei said in a concerned tone. Earlier, he did not express his opinion and even had a faint intention of opposing. He did not know if the imperial envoy would be angry at him. Now that there was a chance to flatter him, he would not let it go. Since Ma Wei had expressed his opinion, Guanyin was not willing to fall behind. He immediately expressed his opinion. General Ma's words are correct. I also completely agree. Good. Seeing that the two of them had both expressed their opinions, Yang Qindong also let out a breath. Then the matter is settled like this. I will leave a portion of people to join the army, but most of the prisoners of war will still be returned to you. Just arrange for them to be watched over. The matter was finally settled. Yang Qindong bid farewell to Guanyin and Ma Wei and called over the commander of the second group of the Cold Front, Luo Pe, commander of the auxiliary group, Lu Zhua, as well as Kong Jie and Song Jie, the two political commissars. The matter of the prisoners of war has been settled. You can choose the right people first. However, remember, you must do things according to the rules. You cannot accept anyone who has serious problems. Otherwise, whoever makes a mistake will be held responsible. Hearing that they could expand the army, although it was only some prisoners of war, Luo Pe and Lu Zhuo were both very happy. Just now they had taken some time to take a look. Among the prisoners of war of the Yellow Bandits, there was no lack of good seedlings with strong bodies. If they were taught well and could be used, they would probably become good soldiers not long after. As for who could be accepted and who could not be accepted, they had long made plans. In addition, the political commissar had brought along a group of battalion-level instructors and company-level instructors to assist. Presumably, there would not be a big problem. Since there was not a big problem, Luo Pe and the other three all agreed with faces full of excitement. Then they began to choose the talents they could use from the prisoners of war. Luo Pe and the others went to choose the good soldiers. Yang Chendong also tested the soldiers under his command. For example, Peng Yu was the first person he needed to test. In this battle, Peng Yu had contributed greatly. He had personally killed the head of the Yellow Bandits' 4 heavenly kings, Gung Jun. This kind of contribution would not be ignored in any army. Thus, Peng Yu was personally received by Yang Chendong. In a quiet military tent at the edge of the battlefield, Yang Chendong saw Peng Yu, who was half kneeling on the ground. "You are Peng Yu. I remember that your leg strength is not bad. You also performed very well in this battle." Being called over by Yang Chendong, Peng Yu was more or less excited. He had already seen that this person's identity was not simple. Now that he was praised by this person, he was naturally unable to contain his joy. "Thank you for the praise. Everything is what Peng Yu should have done." "Hee, no need to call me some chief. You can just call me the 6th young master." Looking at the proud Peng Yu, Yang Chendong felt that this was a good seedling. He immediately revealed his identity with a smile. Sixth young master. Suddenly hearing Yang Chendong call him by his name, Peng Yu was first stunned. Then his eyes widened. His entire body seemed to tremble. His knees went soft and with a plop, he knelt on the ground. "Greetings, 6th young master. I did not know your identity and neglected you before. Please punish me." It was no wonder that Peng Yu was so excited. In Crimson City, who did not know the name of the 6th young master, many people had even seen his true appearance. However, because Peng Yu had entered Crimson City late, he did not have the chance to see him. This had always been a regret in his heart. Now that he was finally able to see the person's face, and at such a close distance, it could almost be described as a private meeting. How could he not be excited on such an occasion? How could he not kneel on the ground in indescribable excitement? Get up. Seeing Peng Yu's reaction, Yang Chendong could not help but laugh out loud. This person's reaction was enough to prove that he did not know his identity. However, to be able to perform so well on the battlefield was enough to prove that he was a hard-working person. Such a character was most suitable to join the cold front. "Yes, thank you, 6th young master." When Peng Yu heard Yang Chendong's words, he immediately got up from the ground in joy. Then he stood in a standard military posture in front of Yang Chendong. "Not bad. You are spirited and your eyes are spirited. You are a good seedling. However, do you know why I told you my identity as the 6th young master?" Yang Chendong looked at Peng Yu, who was standing tall and straight in front of him, and asked with a smile. Forgive me for being stupid. I do not know." Peng Yu thought hard for a moment, before shaking his head in distress. "Ha." Seeing Peng Yu's naive look, Yang Chendong could not help but laugh again. Then he looked at Tiger's mane beside him and said, "Tell him." "Yes." Tiger's mane replied. Then he looked at Peng Yu and said, "Remember, anyone who can be called the 6th young master has the right to join the cold front. This is also the cold front's secret. Now you have it. Do you understand?" Peng Yu was not stupid. On the contrary, he was very quick-witted. Otherwise, he would not have been unscathed after fighting with those wild beasts in the mountains for so many years. Now that he heard Tiger's mane's words, he immediately understood something. He said excitedly, Thank you, sixth young master, for your promotion and training. Peng Yu will perform well in future battles, and will not disappoint the sixth young master. Wait. Yang Chundong interrupted Peng Yu's words of gratitude. Instead, he shook his head and said, "The rule to join the cold front was set by me in the beginning. Since there were rules, everyone had to abide by them. Although your performance is not bad and you have gained the recognition of the young master, you still have to go through the assessment. As for the combat assessment, you have already submitted a satisfactory answer. However, how is your education level? You must know that as an elite member of the Cold Front, you must be literate. You must be able to write and recognize maps. Which one do you know?" When the question of education level was brought up, Peng Yu's face flashed with a troubled expression. Yang Chundong saw this and could not help but feel a little disappointed. He had to admit that Peng Yu's performance on the battlefield was not bad. He knew that Peng Yu was originally a hunter, and had only joined the auxiliary forces for half a year. However, based on the principle of not sticking to one type of talent, he decided to give Peng Yu a chance and make an exception for the assessment in advance. However, if Peng Yu was really illiterate, he would not be able to join the Cold Front. This rule could not be broken by him. Otherwise, if there was a first, there would be a second. It would not be long before the Cold Front would be ruled by a group of martial artists. Such a team might be able to perform well for a while, but it was impossible for them to last long. An army without education and knowledge was destined to not go far. Chapter 376. Just as Yang Chundong was feeling disappointed, Peng Yu answered, "Sixth young master, I can read a few words, but I haven't been studying for long, so I don't know many words. I don't know how to read maps either." "You can read?" He did not consider whether Peng Yu knew how to read maps. Maps were usually used to assess military officers. As long as Peng Yu had some knowledge, he could join the Cold Vanguard. As for whether Peng Yu could have a higher level of knowledge, there would be plenty of opportunities for him to learn in the future. Peng Yu was young, so there would be plenty of opportunities. "Yes, I can read." Peng Yu was quite confident when he said that. Back in Crimson City, Peng Yu's parents and sister found a teacher to teach him for the sake of his future. Peng Yu was not a scholar, but he could still read. "All right, find a book and let him read it." Yang Chundong nodded. He believed that no one would dare to lie to him about something like this, so he spoke to Tiger's mane beside him. Soon, an ancient book was found. The words "3-character classic" were written on the cover. It was more suitable for a newbie. Peng Yu took the ancient book with some fear, but when he read the first line, his face was filled with a confident smile. He had read these 3 words before, but if it was just a test, he wouldn't be afraid at all. Man's nature is good at birth. Similar in nature, different in habits. If you do not teach, your nature will change. The way of teaching is to specialize. Peng Yu was literate and could write. Although his handwriting was not beautiful, he had already met the rules set by Yang Chundong. It should be known that in the current environment, not everyone was qualified to be literate. Therefore, he immediately broke the rules and was promoted from an auxiliary soldier to a Cold Vanguard, becoming an existence that many envied. However, Peng Yu's knowledge was still lacking. At least, he did not know how to read maps, so he was only a normal Cold Vanguard soldier. He was not given any official position. However, as long as he worked hard in the future, once he had more knowledge and learned how to read maps, he would become an officer sooner or later. Even if he didn't become an officer, Peng Yu was already quite satisfied. Being able to join the Cold Front after only being an auxiliary soldier for half a year was something he never dared to imagine. Not to mention, this exceptional promotion was hosted by the 6th young master himself. Just this point alone was enough to make him proud for the rest of his life. Peng Yu happily left the tent. Other than being ordered not to tell the auxiliary soldiers that Yang Chundong was the 6th young master, he had also become a member of the Cold Vanguard that everyone envied. Soon after, the news spread like wildfire among the auxiliary soldiers. At this moment, there were many envious people. Everyone was holding back a wave of energy in their hearts. That was, they had to perform well in the following battles and strive for the opportunity to be promoted. In order to win a battle, morale was a must. Proper command was also a must. However, there was also a standard requirement for the number of soldiers. For example, if 100 people met 10,000 people, how difficult would it be to win? This was the disadvantage brought about by the lack of numbers. Although Crimson City had developed rapidly, its foundation was still too weak. The time it had been established was also too short, resulting in a lack of manpower. Now that there was a chance to expand its strength, both Commander Luo Pu and Commander Lu Zhuo would not let go of this opportunity. Immediately, with the support of the two commanders, the political commissars of the two regiments led a group of political personnel and started to get busy. Groups of strong captives were brought in front of them to register and understand the situation. Although they could use this opportunity to expand the army, there were still rules to be followed. The first step was a strict background check. Register them carefully and see if they have any family members living outside. If they're alone, register them strictly. Not only do we have to listen to them, but we also have to ask them to name at least 2 of their captive friends. We have to verify whether they are right or wrong. As for those who can't be found, put them aside first. We can't accept them if they don't have a clear background. If they are alone, we have to understand how they ended up like this. Why did their family members leave them? Whether they were oppressed by the Yellow Bandits or the Ming Army. We have to find out everything clearly. Ask them seriously if they were literate, if they have learned martial arts, who their master is. We have to register all of these clearly. Questions after questions were asked by the two political commissars, which became the criteria to determine which captives were suitable to be recruited into the army and which were not. While these political personnel were doing their work, Guan Ying's logistical support was also effective. Even Ma Wei was very cooperative. Some of the rich families in Guangzhou were grateful that Yang Qindong led the troops to save them. So they took out silver to buy meat and wine to reward the victorious troops. Lung Feng and the auxiliary troops were able to eat their fill for a few days. Food was the most important thing to the people. Initially, some of the captives were not cooperative with the various inquiries. However, when they saw that anyone who cooperated would be rewarded with meat, everyone's enthusiasm was aroused. Some people didn't even wait for others to take the initiative to ask, and like pouring beans out of a bamboo tube, they told everything they knew about themselves and the people around them. All they wanted was to get a few more pieces of meat. These people were called the Yellow Bandits, but most of them were made up of commoners who did not have a livelihood. To them, they did not particularly care whether they rebelled or not. As long as they could fill their stomachs with someone, they would follow that person. For these people, the temptation of meat was naturally great. Ever since they saw this, the Yang family army's politicians had made full use of this point. It was because of the large amount of delicious food that their work progressed very quickly. Thanks to this quick and efficient work, many captives with suitable conditions were selected. After a short period of ideological work, they became part of the temporary auxiliary troops. Temporary auxiliary troops were the difference between them and real auxiliary troops. They were the lowest level of existence. But even so, only about 2,000 people were selected from the 30,000 captives. These people were quickly divided and assigned to the auxiliary troops camp, where the old led the new. This was the experience of the Yang army's rapid development. Ba Daojiang was one of these temporary auxiliary troops. At first, this name did not sound like a person's name, but more like a place's name. However, it was actually a nickname given by the people of the underworld. This person's skin was slightly dark, and he was not very tall. However, the muscles on his body seemed to be in an explosive state. At first glance, one could tell that he was not an ordinary commoner, but a martial artist. In fact, Ba Daojiang had been practicing martial arts since young. After he finished his apprenticeship, he mingled in the underworld. When he first started out, because he did not have much experience in the underworld, he offended someone and was almost assassinated. After that, he began to chase after the real culprit. He chased after the culprit for 3 days and 3 nights. During that time, he passed by 8 different rivers of different sizes. In the end, he killed the culprit who had assassinated him. After that, he became known as Ba Daojiang. As time passed, he began to forget his original name, and began to call himself Ba Daojiang. This time, he was originally wandering around Guangdong, fighting for justice and looking for a future that belonged to him. Coincidentally, the city of Wuzhou that he was previously in had been attacked by the Huang bandits. He was trapped in the city and had joined this group by some strange coincidence. After wandering around the underworld, he had seen many things. This made Ba Daojiang dislike some of the local officials of the Ming Dynasty. They often used their power to bully others and took advantage of the commoners. Just based on the number of people that he had seen, he did not know how many families had been destroyed by the officials. After losing confidence in the Ming Dynasty, Ba Daojiang joined the Huang bandit army to see if they could really bring new hope to the commoners. However, when he attacked Zhaoqing Prefecture, he was once again disappointed by the burning, killing and looting. He had the intention to leave, but before he found a good place to go, he forced himself to stay in the Huang bandit army. Unexpectedly, during the attack on Guangzhou Prefecture, he was sleeping in the barracks when there was a commotion outside. When he got dressed and came out of the barracks, he saw the Huang bandit army fleeing in all directions. In order to save his own life, Ba Daojiang was prepared to escape. In the process of escaping, he even injured 2 of his auxiliary soldiers. However, he was eventually stopped by the elites from the outside. When Ba Daojiang saw more than 10 bandits being killed by firearms from afar, he wisely chose not to take the lead. In the end, he followed the crowd and became a captive. There were so many captives, and Ba Daojiang was only one in 30,000 of them. In addition, he hadn't done anything outrageous, so he wasn't in a hurry. He only thought that the law couldn't punish the masses. In the end, these people would still be dismissed. Because even if they wanted to be locked up in prison, there wasn't a prison that could hold so many people. As he waited patiently, he was attracted by the meat that Lung Feng took out. Ba Daojiang did not have any other hobbies other than good wine and meat. How could he not be moved by the delicious food in front of him? As such, in order to achieve his goal, he revealed some of his situation. As he did not have any relatives and did not know where his parents were, he became an important target for investigation. After finding out from his friends that he did not join the Huang bandit army for long, and did not do anything to harm the civilians, he was selected to be a temporary auxiliary soldier, and lived a life of meat. There was no free lunch in the world. After eating delicious meat, Ba Daojiang and the other temporary auxiliary soldiers would be called for a meeting every night. Lung Feng and 2 auxiliary soldiers would be in charge of the meeting. The content was for everyone to talk about their past and history, about the injustice they had seen, and about the grievances they had suffered. At first, Ba Daojiang didn't know why he said all this. But when he saw some people being encouraged to talk about their own stories, and some talking about how their loved ones died under the Ming Dynasty's corrupt and deceitful policies, or were forced to die or starve to death, tears streamed down his face. He was heartbroken. Chapter 377. Every time someone did something like this, it would cause the other temporary soldiers to shed tears as well. From these words, they seemed to recall some of the painful experiences they had gone through. The grievance meeting was a method of training soldiers that Yang Chendong had proposed. By letting everyone vent their grievances, not only would it allow them to vent their frustrations, it would also shorten the distance between them. As time went by, everyone naturally became closer to each other. This change happened unknowingly, and when some people realized it, they had already fallen in love with this atmosphere. Here, not only was there unity and love between comrades, there was also mutual respect. No one would be discriminated against because of their low birth. More importantly, they could eat meat every day, and it was 3 meals a day. In a short period of time, they were all fed white and fat. Ba Daojiang was also affected by this atmosphere. During one of the grievance meeting, he even took the initiative to speak about some of the injustices he had experienced and seen. He talked about how a local landlord had taken a liking to a woman and forced her husband to kill him. In the end, he forced the woman to jump into a river and killed the landlord's family in a fit of rage. Many people in the meeting shed tears and praised Ba Daojiang's righteous actions. Then they said with righteous indignation that they wanted to eradicate the evil nobles in the world. Under such an atmosphere, Ba Daojiang also fell in love with this place, and began to pay attention to the lives of the Lung Feng and the other temporary soldiers. He realized that these people were very obedient and treated others kindly. More importantly, they were all quite strong, and most of them were literate and sensible. All these discoveries left Ba Daojiang astonished. It was not that he had never seen or interacted with the Ming army, but it was his first time seeing an army like this. Especially once, when he saw a Lung Feng pour hot water for a temporary soldier to soak his feet, saying that it could get rid of the fatigue of the day, he was truly shocked. Was there really such a kind army in the world? If there was, then wasn't this his goal, his heaven on earth? The more he learned, the more shocked he became. Not only Ba Daojiang, but more and more people also found out that the Lung Feng before them were not Ming soldiers, but mercenaries hired by the southern Ming emperor. They were superior to some of the Ming dynasty's troops. Their combat power was astonishing and their military discipline was strict. They trained hard and their military quality was strong. They ate well and received good treatment. At the same time, they also owned the world's most powerful firearms and so on. All of this shocked Ba Daojiang. At the same time, he also started to feel envious. When he finally couldn't help but ask a temporary soldier if he could become a real temporary soldier, or even a Lung Feng that everyone envied, he received an affirmative answer. As long as you are willing to work and obey orders, anyone can have a good future here. It was these words that made Ba Daojiang completely put down the burden in his heart. He made a decision in his heart that he must perform well, and strive to be able to make contributions in the next battle. At this time, other than training with the Lung Feng and the temporary soldiers, he also took the initiative to learn how to read. He heard that if he wanted to become a Lung Feng, he had to learn how to read because a very mysterious sixth young master said that an uneducated army would not have a future. Although he didn't know what this so-called future was, since everyone was doing this, he would follow and learn. Perhaps there really would be a future that belonged to him? 2,000 temporary auxiliary soldiers had been transferred to Yang Qindong's side. Thus, the original 1,200 soldiers had been strengthened to 3,200 soldiers. Once the training was completed, the 2,000 soldiers should be able to unleash a considerable amount of combat power. Guan Ying and Ma Wei let out a sigh of relief when they only picked 2,000 captives and the ratio of 1 to 15. They were afraid that the imperial envoy would take all 30,000 captives. In that case, they would have military strength, but whether or not they would be able to form a fighting force was another matter. Also, food and drink for 30,000 people was a big problem. Fortunately, Yang Qindong only took 2,000 people, so it didn't give them too much pressure. On the 5th day after the victory, the Guangdong political commissioner, Liu Youfu, finally arrived at the foot of Guangzhou Prefecture. The 28,000 captives were handed over to him. As for how they would be treated, whether they would be locked in prison or sent to the city as forced labor, that was the matter of the local officials. After shaking off the burden of the captives, Guaning and Ma Wei came together to find Yang Qindong to discuss whether or not they could stop chasing after the desperate enemy. Yang Qindong had long expected Guaning and Ma Wei's arrival. The three of them met in the military tent. Other than Beta Persei, who was following behind them, there was no one else in the tent. Yang Qindong finally opened his mouth. "Generals, but I don't know what you mean by chasing after the bandits?" Yang Qindong asked with a puzzled face. When he was asked about the proper matter, Ma Wei's expression became excited. He rubbed his fists and said, "Sir, the Huang bandits outside Guangzhou Prefecture have been defeated and have retreated to Zhaoqing Prefecture. I heard that they are collecting the remnants of their soldiers, but in the end, it is difficult for the hearts of the people to follow after their defeat. This is the time for us to follow up our victory and chase after them. If we can quickly reach the foot of the city, like when we went from Ganzhou to Guangzhou Prefecture, I think we will be able to intimidate the enemy. Winning the battle will be a certainty. At that time, after the Huang bandits have suffered heavy losses, they will truly be unable to continue and will have to leave. Then we can return Guangdong to a time of peace. For this matter, General Guan and I have already made preparations. All the food on the road has been prepared, and is enough for the army." Just as Ma Wei finished speaking, Guan Ying, who was standing to the side, took the initiative to say, "Yes, I have prepared enough meat pies for the army to reach Wuzhou Prefecture. There is still some left. You can rest assured on this point." At this moment, Guan Ying's mentality had long relaxed. Originally, Guangya minister had arranged for him to follow beside Yang Qindong, because he needed him to study at the side. In the future, he could become a general and become the cornerstone of the Southern Ming Ministry of War. Even Guaning himself thought this way. However, on the road from Guangzhou to Guangzhou Prefecture, Guan Ying's mentality had more or less changed. After he saw the strength of the mercenaries, the competitive heart in his heart had weakened greatly. Especially after he learned that Yang Qindong had used 800 men to break through the Huang bandits' 80,000-strong army. He became even more aware of the difference between the two sides. Yang Qindong used troops like a god. In this aspect, he was ashamed of his inferiority. However, what he admired more was the strength of the mercenaries themselves. With such strong troops, as long as the commander was not an idiot, it would probably be difficult for them to lose a battle. Since this was the case, he might as well not interfere with military matters. Instead, he would focus on logistics and study at the side. When the Guangdong matter was over, he could report it to Guangya minister, and similarly choose people from the army to train a group of elite troops. In the future, he would be a general and be able to use them. Guaning was completely convinced, as was Ma Wei. The two of them had the same thoughts and both found Yang Qindong to ask him to send troops. The two southern Ming generals had the same view. Yang Qindong's eyes narrowed into slits. The actions of these two people were like the old saying, "Sweep the snow in front of your own door." Just as Ma Wei had said, if the Huang bandits were heavily injured, they might leave Guangdong. Thus this place was safe. However, what about other places? What about Guangxi, which was close to Guangdong? Moreover, once they left Guangxi, what would happen to Yunnan? If they gathered together with Zhu Huiyan and the others, wouldn't that be a new problem? Yang Qindong could think of these things, but he did not believe that Ma Wei and Guaning could not. Especially the latter. As the minister-counselor of the Ministry of War, he was highly valued by Guangya. How could he not predict such a situation? However, they still wanted to send troops to Wuzhou House. One had to say that they knew what to do. Thinking back to when Guangdong was in chaos, Guangxi did not send troops to help. On the contrary, they placed troops in the cities near each other to prevent the Huang bandits from entering other places. Such a method naturally allowed Guangxi to be temporarily safe. However, this would only increase the pressure on Guangdong. The Huang bandits could not go to other places, so they could only cause trouble in Guangdong. Such a method was really hurtful. This was why Ma Wei wanted to chase the Huang bandits out of Guangdong. As for where they went, he did not say and did not think about it. Even Guaning pretended that he didn't know anything. If one chopstick was easily broken, 10 chopsticks would not be broken. This was the power of unity. The relationship between Guangdong and Guangxi was enough to show that Nanming and Baiming were not on good terms. The various houses under Nanming were not on good terms. If this continued, the internal losses would be too great. How could the people not be in chaos? How could the people live a good life? How could they not die? Yang Qindong thought of his own Yangxia. In the beginning, all sides were united. What if this went on for a long time? If the territory became bigger and the population increased, what would the result be? Would there be people who would raise their own troops and respect themselves? Would there be people who also had the same idea of sweeping the snow in front of their own door? There must be. Since Ji Ranqing had predicted the emergence of these problems, how to solve them? It must be known that the current transportation system was too underdeveloped. Once something happened, it would be a long time before anyone knew about it. This was not conducive to the management of a large area of land. As such, he needed to think carefully about how to do it best. In short, the mistakes that happened to others could not happen to himself. Otherwise, even if he became stronger, he would not be able to maintain this situation for long. Yang Qindong was deep in thought for a long time without speaking. Ma Wei and Guaning were very anxious. After the two of them looked at each other, they whispered, "Sir, when do you think we should send troops?" Chapter 378. Do you really only want to chase the yellow bandits out of Guangdong? If one day other places do the same, won't they come back to Guangdong? When that time comes, what should we do? Yang Chendong suddenly raised his head. His gaze was as sharp as a sword as he looked at Ma Wei and asked. Ma Wei panicked when he was asked this question. Just as he did not know how to answer, Yang Chendong's gaze turned and landed on Guanning. General Ma is the commander of the Guangdong Guards. It is understandable that you only have Guangdong in your eyes, but General Guan is the vice director of the Southern Ming Ministry of War. You should have the bigger picture in your eyes. Are you also so short-sighted? Guan Ying's expression froze. He quickly lowered his head and said with an embarrassed expression, "Sir, I was wrong." "I was wrong as well." Ma Wei saw that Guan Ying from the Ministry of War was reprimanded. How could he continue to be stubborn? He quickly lowered his head as if admitting his mistake. Seeing that the two had admitted their mistakes, Yang Chendong's expression relaxed. "Forget it. I was entrusted by the emperor and had to consider the long term. If we only chase the yellow bandits out of Guangdong, it does not count as completing the mission. That is why I said what I said just now. If it was too serious, I ask for your understanding." Yang Chendong's words slowed down and there was a hint of self-blame. Immediately, Ma Wei and Guan Ying's expressions became uneasy. "Sir, what are you saying? You have great insight and thought things through. We can learn from you." Everyone liked to hear flattery. Yang Chendong's expression also became much better. "Good, since the two generals have the same opinion, then let's see how we can get rid of the yellow bandits once and for all." As he spoke, Yang Chendong walked in front of the sand table in the tent. The sand table was a military sand table. It had already appeared in the Ming Dynasty, but its name was Kanyu Map. It was said that the martial great master Zhu Hozhao loved to play with sand tables. The sand table had already marked out the areas where the yellow bandits were active. Yellow flags were placed on top. The surrounding southern Ming troops had black flags in their hands. Come and take a look." After the defeat at the prefecture of Guangzhou, Huang Yuliang retreated to the Zhaoqing prefecture with his remaining troops, and is resting there. To the north of Wuzhou, there was a ridge known as Mengzhu Ridge. Once one left from here, one could enter Guizhou and Huguang. In order to prevent the chaos of the yellow bandits from spreading everywhere, this imperial envoy has already arranged for Pingle Prefecture's General He Sheng and 2 battalions of the mercenary army to defend that place, making it impossible for them to leave. Then to the south of Xuanzhou Prefecture, Gaozhou is extremely close to Laizhou. If things go south, the yellow bandits can also pass through here to reach Shanghai. In order to prevent this imperial envoy has also arranged for Ganzhou Prefecture's General Yu Ping and 2 battalions of the mercenary army to defend that place, cutting off their path of retreat. When Yang Chendong said this, Guan Ying and Ma Wei had a look of sudden realization. Previously, Hao Sheng and General Yu Guang had suddenly disappeared without a trace. They had guessed that they had received the imperial envoy's military orders, but no one had been able to guess what they had done. Looking at it now, they knew that Yang Chendong had long made plans and arrangements. Thus, the defeat of the yellow bandits in front of the Canton prefecture should have been within his expectations. Thinking about how he had even calculated the future situation and made preparations. At the same time the two of them sighed in admiration. They acknowledged the title of the god of war even more. Yang Chendong did not look at their expressions. It was as if he did not care about their thoughts. Instead, he continued, "Thus if the yellow bandits want to establish themselves, other than fighting us head-on, they can only choose to retreat to Guangxi. General Guan, you are an official of the Ministry of War. Please immediately inform the Guangxi Guards to guard the front line between Nanning Prefecture and Liuzhou Prefecture. No matter what, they cannot give the yellow bandits an opportunity. Of course, if they do not have the ability to guard it, then being affected by the bandits will have nothing to do with us. I will give them 7 days to prepare. After 7 days, the troops will march to Wuzhou Prefecture and completely take care of the Huang bandits." A palm landed on the sand table. Yang Chendong spoke with a determined expression. It was clear that he had already made up his mind. Yes. Guan Ying and Ma Wei both sighed in admiration as they spoke. At this moment, they finally understood that this imperial envoy was not doing nothing. On the contrary, he had thought of everything. He was particular about planning before acting. In terms of ability, he was much stronger than them. Guanning sent people to send a message to the Guangxi army. Ma Wei also began to gather more food for the army. After seeing the power of the mercenaries, they did not dare to be the slightest bit negligent in terms of food. The Yang family army was able to have better food. Every day they ate until they were full and rested well. The morale of the army was greatly boosted. Even the 2,000 temporary auxiliary soldiers blended into this positive atmosphere. Some people were already planning in their hearts that if there was a big battle, they would perform well and strive to remove the word temporary from their heads. Zhaoqing Manor. The original Yamen became Huang Yuliang's place to rest and work. Because of the defeat of the Guang province soldiers, although there were still many yellow bandits in Zhaoqing Manor, the entire atmosphere had become much lower. The morale of the soldiers was low. As the main commander, Huang Yuliang of course was anxious. He called for Zhu Fangyong, who had saved his life outside the Guang province city. Outside the Guang province city, if Zhu Fangyong had not acted decisively, Huang Yuliang would not have been able to escape. Thinking about how General Geng Jun had been so brave and good at fighting but had still died in front of the battlefield, he felt waves of fear. It was because Zhu Fangyong had saved his life that he relied heavily on this person. Since Huang Yuliang liked Zhu Fangyong so much, it was hard for the people below to not be jealous. Someone asked why things were so coincidental. They had just wanted to use the arrival of the reinforcements to lure Ma Wei out of the city when the reinforcements actually arrived. Was there some connection? Some people even doubted Zhu Fangyong's loyalty. After all, this person had only joined the Yellow Bandits for a short time. In the face of these rumors, Zhu Fangyong actually admitted to it. He said that all of this was the blessings of the heavens. It was all thanks to this plan. Otherwise, if they were caught off guard, would the Southern Ming Empire's reinforcements not come? If that really happened, the losses would be even greater. However, the scouts were so useless that they did not even give a warning when the Southern Ming Empire's reinforcements arrived. They had truly missed the opportunity. When Zhu Fangyong's words reached Huang Yuliang's ears, not only did he not doubt this person, but he also thought that this was a blessing from the heavens. While praising him and making him his trusted aide, he also killed the scout to improve the morale of the troops. After Zhu Fangyong became Huang Yuliang's trusted aide, he naturally became an important guest. He was often called over to eat together and at the same time, analyzed the current situation. General Zhu, we have already been in Zhaoqing Manor for a period of time. We have also gathered many scattered soldiers, but I don't know why the Southern Ming Empire's army did not take this opportunity to attack us. What are they planning to do? Huang Yuliang's face was filled with worry. The Southern Ming Empire's reinforcements were truly too powerful. They were so powerful that he felt a bone-deep fear. Young master, there is no need to worry. There must be a reason why the Southern Ming Empire's reinforcements did not come. From this general's point of view, it should be because their own military strength is insufficient. This general has sent people to inquire about some news. I heard that the Southern Ming Empire's reinforcements have actually recruited some of our brothers as soldiers. Haha, it seems that they are really desperate. Zhu Fangyong said with a smile, but he was truly worried. He thought about the information he had received from the Security Bureau 2 days ago. It said that the 6th young master wanted him to keep Huang Yuliang in Zhaoqing no matter what and wait for him to bring his troops over to carry out his previous plan. He also said that the Yang family's army was too small. If they wanted to achieve anything, they had to expand their army and accept many yellow bandits as soldiers. He was truly shocked. As for keeping Huang Yuliang in Zhaoqing City, Zhu Fangyong felt that it was not difficult to do. This was because this young master Huang did not want to admit defeat and wanted to rise again. How could he leave so easily? It was not easy to get to Zhaoqing City. However, as for the matter of recruiting yellow bandits as soldiers, he was truly worried. Zhu Fangyong, who had stayed in the yellow bandits' army for a period of time, knew that they were just a bunch of villagers who had no choice but to join the army to fill their stomachs. They did not have any culture, and did not understand any great principles. They would only follow whoever gave them food. Would these people be loyal? Would these people be of any use on the battlefield? He did not want to drag down other allies. Although he was worried, this was something the sixth young master would do. Due to his respect and reliance on the sixth young master, he did not say anything in the end. He was currently in Zhaoqing City, and could not care about things that were too far away. It was better to complete the mission first. Huang Yuliang was originally raising a cup of strong wine to his mouth when he heard Zhu Fangyong's words. When he heard that his subordinates had been recruited by the Southern Ming, he was first stunned and then laughed. His originally nervous expression instantly relaxed. Ha ha ha, the Southern Ming actually recruited our soldiers. Is this true? I sent out 3 groups of people, and the news they sent back was the same. It should not be false. Zhu Fangyong replied with a serious expression. Good, haha, good. Huang Yuliang stood up with a face full of joy. The Southern Ming actually used our soldiers as soldiers. This shows that they have too few soldiers. More importantly, they do not know that the people who can join my volunteer army are all warriors who have lost faith in the Southern Ming. If they lose on the battlefield, in order to survive, they will have to surrender to save their lives. However, their hearts will still be on our side. If we use these people, once the 2 sides fight and we have the upper hand, they will very likely turn their spearhead on the battlefield. That will be the time they reap what they sow. Ha ha. Chapter 379. The laughing Huang Yuliang finally relaxed. Even the captives had to be reorganized. It seemed that the Southern Ming army was really weak, facing such an opponent, so what if they lost once? Compared to Huang Yuliang's mocking laughter, Zhu Qizhen was laughing to his heart's content in the Southern Ming capital, Nanjing. At the same time in the Political Affairs Hall, Zhu Qizhen looked at the 6 ministers and several other important officials with a smile on his face. Come everyone, take a look. This is the report of victory that we just received. The Guangzhou government was victorious. More than 10,000 enemy leaders were killed, and nearly 30,000 people were captured. We have greatly damaged the arrogance of the yellow bandits. The report of the battle had just been received. At this moment, Zhu Qizhen's mood was very good. In the past few days his expression, which had been troubled by the situation in Yunnan, was much more relaxed. The report of victory was quickly read by several important officials. The officials immediately knelt on the ground and said loudly, "Your Majesty is blessed by the heavens. Congratulations, long live your Majesty." That's right. The heavens have indeed treated me well. Beloved official Liu, immediately prepare to worship the heavens. I want to announce it to the world. Since ancient times, the imperial family liked to seek good luck. How could Zhu Qizhen let go of the opportunity to show off his wise and powerful status? Yes, your Majesty. Liu De stood in position and complied. However, he did not immediately go to work after answering. First, he had a thoughtful expression. Then, he raised his head and slowly said, "Your Majesty, this official does not understand military affairs. However, from reading, I know the principle of pursuing the enemy. Why is it that the Guangzhou government has clearly defeated the yellow bandits, but did not pursue the enemy?" Following Liu De's words, Zhu Qizhen, who was sitting on the dragon throne, had a serious expression on his face. This scene was clearly seen by the Minister of War, Kuang Yi. Immediately he held his ceremonial tablet and walked out. Minister Liu, Minister Counselor Yanning has already reported back. He said that the Ming army and the mercenaries were already very tired. In addition, we did not have enough troops, so we did not pursue. On this point, this official agrees with this action. So it is like this. This official has worried too much. Seeing that Zhu Qizhen's expression had turned ugly, Liu De knew that he had achieved his goal. He knew when to stop and stood back. Your Majesty, Duke of Loyalty and Courage's command this time was successful. Guan Ying and the others cooperated well. This subject thinks that we should reward them and encourage them so that they can go all out and be driven by us. Kuang Yi had no intention of chasing after Liu De. Since he had already stood up, he naturally had to ask for credit for the soldiers on the front lines. This was also his duty as the Minister of War. When Kuang Yi mentioned the reward, Zhu Qizhen nodded. Issue an edict. Guaning will be conferred the title of Director of the Ministry of War. All other meritorious service personnel will be promoted by 1 rank and rewarded between 1,000 and 100 taels of silver. As for the Duke of Loyalty, his name is borrowed from Baiming. If you want to reward him, you need to inform them. Let's leave it to the Ministry of Rights. Yes. Lu De, who had just retreated, stood up again and respectfully answered. However, anyone could see that if this matter was left to this person to handle, it was unknown when a reply would come. It was even possible that there would never be a reply. Kuang Yi also wanted to say something on behalf of Yang Qindong. In the secret letter that Guaning had given him, it was clear that without the imperial envoy, it would have been difficult to win this battle. How could such a talent be neglected or offended? However, before he could say anything, Zhu Qizhen had already stood up and said, "You can all disperse. We are tired and need to rest for a while. If there are no important matters, do not disturb us." After saying this, he seemed to stare at Kuang Yi as if these words were only for him to hear. Speaking of which, Zhu Qizhen both loved and feared Yang Qindong. He loved him because this person was indeed talented, and had once saved his life. It was not an exaggeration to say that he was his benefactor. He was afraid that it was because Yang Qindong was too powerful. In the Guangdong matter, the Southern Ming army had always been at a disadvantage. However, he had won a great battle as soon as he arrived. This kind of result naturally made people happy, but at the same time, it made people worried. This person was so good at fighting to the outside world. If one day he had some thoughts that he should not have, then who could keep him in check? Since ancient times, what emperors liked to play with the most was the art of balance. Pulling one side to fight another, pulling the weak to fight the strong, to maintain the balance of the court. This way he, as the emperor, was even more important. However, looking at it now, Yang Qindong's power was probably unrivaled. This kind of person had to be used, but it had to be guarded. This time he did not reward the other party. Of course, to the outside world, it was because he was the official of the Baiming. There were some things that had to be considered when it came to him. The court dispersed. The important officials left the political affairs hall one by one. Only Kuang Yi was still standing there in a daze, as if he had lost his soul. "Minister Feng." A voice sounded beside him, calling Kuang Yi's wandering soul back. When he turned his head and saw the person, he forced a smile. "So it's Minister Wang." The person who came was Wang Zhua. He was also one of the 9 important officials that Yang Qindong saved during the Battle of Tumu. At this time, when he saw Kuang Yi's lifeless eyes, he had already guessed what the other party was thinking. He shook his head and persuaded, "Minister Feng, you don't need to think too much. We have been officials for many years. How can we not know the emperor's thoughts? Even that Duke of Loyalty and Courage should be very clear. Moreover, he shouldn't mind too much." "He won't mind?" Kuang Yi asked, not quite understanding. Why would he mind? For him, the Duke of Loyalty and Courage is already an extremely high honor. He is only 21 years old. In history, there are very few people who can do this. As the saying goes, it's lonely at the top. Wang Zhua's lips moved slightly, speaking slowly. Then he cupped his fists and said, "The Duke of Loyalty and Courage is a smart person. This kind of person is very opinionated and will endure humiliation. Otherwise, he would not have such achievements. Besides, since this is the emperor's intention, we as officials are powerless to change it. We only need to speak the truth. As for what kind of situation will occur, we can only wait and see." Wang Zhua looked like he saw it very clearly. This was also because he was the Minister of Revenue. Originally, he dealt with money. It could be said that he always calculated the accounts very clearly. Because of fear, Ingzong found a reason not to reward Yang Qindong. This was originally the emperor's power. But he did forget one thing. That was this time he was facing Yang Qindong. Was he such a good person? It was said that in Baiming, because the Minister of Justice, Yu Shiyue, offended him, he was overthrown. Even Daizong could not protect him. How could such a person not fight back after being schemed against? Just wait and see. If this goes on, Zhu Qizhen is likely to suffer the consequences of his own actions. Because Wang Zhou saw through everything, he knew that this was a battle between two tigers. Bystanders could not persuade, so he did not say anything. At this time, he told Kuang Yi all of this. This oldest minister of war quickly understood. He sighed and said, "Ai, this old man is old. I'm afraid I won't be able to serve the emperor for long." "Yes, since you don't have enough energy, it's better to take a good rest." Wang Zhou chuckled. His hint was effective. Since he could not solve any problem by speaking, it was better to not say anything and just watch. The so-called old meant that his energy was limited. It meant that Kuang Yi would not say anything more on this matter. The two important officials spoke, and then left the political affairs hall after everyone else. They were thinking about what kind of expression the front line would have after receiving the imperial edict. A few days later, it was the last day for the Ming army to rest. According to the plan, the army would leave the Guang province house the next morning and head toward Jiaoqing House, which was heavily guarded by the yellow bandits. Food and equipment were all prepared. With the cooperation of Administrator Liu Youfu, Commander Ma Wei, and Guanning, all of the work was done. When the time came, the army would set off. Compared to the last time, the number of troops was much higher. For the Ming army, Ma Wei and Guanning led 4,000 soldiers. For the mercenaries, there were 4 companies of Lungfeng, 8 companies of support soldiers, 8 companies of support soldiers, and 2,000 temporary support soldiers. In total, there were 3,200 people. On the surface, it did not seem like a lot. It was about the size of a normal garrison. However, in reality, the morale of this army was very high, especially their combat strength. Even if there were several times more troops, they would not be a match for them. On this point, Ma Wei and Guanning were very confident. They were looking forward to doing something new. It was also at this time that the eunuch who announced Emperor Yingzong's edict came. The moment he appeared, he asked all of the generals above the rank of Chiliarch to enter the tent. Ma Wei, Guanning, and the others naturally rushed over. However, when the news reached Yang Qindong in another tent, he was playing 5-in-a-row chess with his wife, Hu Yan, and they looked like they were in the midst of a battle. The tent door opened from the outside and Tiger's Mane walked in. "Young master, the eunuch that Emperor Yingzong sent has arrived. He is now meeting with the Ming army general." "Oh, he is not slow," Yang Qindong answered absent-mindedly. Then he looked up at Hu Yan and said, "Yinner, it is your turn to go. Watch carefully, or else I will win." Lu Lang. Seeing that Yang Qindong was not moved and had no intention of meeting with the eunuch, Hu Yan said worriedly, When he saw Hu Yan's worried expression, Yang Qindong said with a relaxed face, It's okay. Husband has his own plans. If I am not wrong, it should have nothing to do with me. Since that is the case, why should I join in the fun? We will be on the road tomorrow. It is better to take advantage of the time to relax. Come, let's continue." Oh. Since her husband said that nothing would happen, Hu Yan completely believed that nothing would happen. She immediately agreed and began to think about how to write the next sentence. Tiger's Mane only came to deliver the news. Since the young master knew, his task was completed. He then left the tent, and it seemed to be quiet again. Chapter 380. In contrast, the large tent not far away was particularly lively. When the eunuch announced the emperor's decree, if everyone was not rewarded with silver taels, they were rewarded with military exploits, and they were promoted. Which one of them was not in high spirits? Even Ma Wei, because of his meritorious service, had offset the crime of losing his territory. "General Ma, Dr. Guan, why don't I see the imperial envoy?" The eunuch who was in charge of announcing the edict spoke with a hint of dissatisfaction when he did not see Yang Qindong appear after he had finished what he was supposed to say. The position of eunuchs in the Ming dynasty was not low. In history, many eunuchs with power came from this dynasty. To be able to become an edict-announcing eunuch, which one of them did not have the trust of the emperor? Outside officials did not dare to offend such a person. As for his question, the two of them had to answer. After they looked at each other with great tacit understanding, Guanning took the initiative to stand out and say, replying to eunuch, the Duke of Loyalty is not in the camp. He must have gone out to patrol. You also know that as the commander of the army, it is normal to have more worries. Oh, that is a pity. I wanted to admire the Duke of Loyalty's elegance. Since this is not a coincidence, we will meet again if we have the chance. The edict announcing eunuch's face was filled with disappointment. He did not know that his words, in the eyes of Ma Wei and Guanning, were no different from missing out on life and death. Thinking back to the time when Yang Chendong killed Jia Ping and punished Han Qing, how swift was that? It also showed that this person was not to be trifled with. This time, he rewarded everyone, but did not mention Yang Chendong. With his temper, who knew what he would do? At this time, this eunuch was still thinking of going to see the imperial envoy. If he did not do well, he might be kicked out in a fit of anger. If that was not a brush with death, what was it? After the edict announcing eunuch received some benefits and silver from Ma Wei, Guanning, and the others, he left with a smile on his face. The two generals were left with bitter expressions on their faces. In the battle outside of Guangzhou Prefecture City, the two of them should be very clear about who should have the greatest merit. However, this time, the emperor had given out rewards other than the greatest merit. In this way, wouldn't they feel ashamed to accept it? Of course, the most important thing was that they were leaving for Wuzhou tomorrow. At this moment, would the imperial envoy be angry? Would the plan change? The two of them really wanted to go to Yang Chendong's tent to find out what was going on. But they were also worried that if they really went there, they would run into bad luck. In the end, they came up with a solution, which was to use the excuse that the rich gentry in the Guangzhou government wanted to hold a farewell party for the army to test Yang Chendong's agreement. With the decision made, the two of them entered the city and found the Guangdong provincial commissioner, Lu Youfu, and briefly explained the situation. Lord Lu, I'll have to trouble you with this matter. After all, you are the Guangdong provincial commissioner. This time, the emperor only rewarded military generals and not civil officials. It looks like it has nothing to do with you. Presumably, if you go now, even if the imperial envoy is a bit angry, he won't come for you. Ma Wei said with a forced smile. Yes, from what I see, Lord Lu is indeed the most suitable person. After all, the rich gentry wants to hold a farewell party for the army. This is the matter of the local officials. Guanning added on. At this moment, Lu Youfu knew that he had been sold. However, when he thought about how this battle was for the peace of Guangdong, only after it was done well could his position as the provincial commissioner be considered legitimate. Even if it was for himself, he had to do something. All right, I'll go take a look. However, remember, you owe me a good meal of wine. Of course, this was a joke. With Lu Youfu saying this, Ma Wei and Guanning nodded their heads in agreement. Then they watched Lord Lu enter the imperial envoy's tent. He went in quickly and came back even faster. When Lu Youfu came out, he shook his head as he walked. This scene fell into the eyes of Ma Wei and Guanning, and could be said to be endlessly worried. When he came closer, the two of them went up and asked, "How is Lord Lu? Did the imperial envoy change the plan?" The plan hasn't changed. The imperial envoy said that everything is as usual. Lu Youfu shook his head and said the result. Hearing that there were no changes, Ma Wei and Guanying's faces relaxed. However, they then asked in confusion, "Lu Dayo, if everything is as usual, why did you act like that just now? What is the meaning of this?" It's just that when I saw the imperial envoy's expression was as usual, and his reply was also quick, I thought that the reward this time was indeed a bit unfair. Lu Youfu said with a sigh. When he saw Yang Chendong just now, the other party was still the same as before, as if the eunuch who announced the decree had never appeared. This kind of calmness, this kind of ease, and even this kind of broad-mindedness could not help but be admired. At least, if it were him, he probably would not have such a calm expression. Only then did Lu Youfu express his feelings. However, when these words were spoken, the three of them did not speak anymore. After all, the eunuch who announced the decree was under the emperor's orders. As officials, they did not have the courage to talk about the emperor in private. Fortunately, the plan was as usual. so they could go back and have a good night's sleep. In the military tent not far away, Yang Qindong was thinking about something with his eyes closed. Hu Yan had already left to prepare dinner, leaving only Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei here. Young master? Are you not angry? Seeing that there were no outsiders, Tiger's Mane finally could not help but ask. That's right, I also want to ask this. To the side, Beta Persei lowered his voice. This was not because he was talking about a secret, but because his voice was like thunder. When he spoke normally, it would sometimes scare Yang Qindong, which was why he was forbidden to lower his pitch when he spoke in the future. The two taciturn people beside them, who usually did not ask themselves and rarely spoke, had actually spoken on this matter. Yang Qindong's originally closed eyes slowly opened. He then looked at the two of them with interest and said, "What? You're fighting for justice on behalf of the young master?" "Young master, it's not fighting for justice, it's the truth. Why are those people who did not do anything great rewarded, but you don't have anything?" Seeing that Yang Qindong was not angry, Tiger's Mane became much bolder when he spoke. "Ha ha ha, well said, it's the truth." Yang Qindong nodded, seeming to agree with Tiger's Mane's statement, but then shook his head. "But what does the truth matter? When others must turn a blind eye to it, the truth can also be treated as if it doesn't exist. At the end of the day, everything depends on strength." After Yang Qindong said this, he looked at Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei and said in a teaching tone, "Remember, benefits are not something that you want, but should be fought for with practical actions. Only when you become strong, no one will dare to give you a hard time, and all kinds of unfairness will leave you. On the contrary, before that, even if you have any dissatisfaction, you need to endure it. Otherwise, even if you have great talent, I'm afraid you won't have the chance to show it, understand?" These words were somewhat profound, but the two of them had been with Yang Qindong for more than a day or two. Even if they didn't understand the whole thing, they understood the gist of it. Young master's words were nothing more than that. They were not strong enough now, and they still needed to work hard to develop. Only when they developed and became stronger, such unfair things would not happen again. "Yes, young master, we understand. We will work harder in the future," Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei both said with a solemn expression. "Very good." Seeing that the other party understood what he meant, Yang Qindong first smiled, then closed his mouth again. He was thinking about the problem of how Yangtze's population could grow rapidly. In the end, the development of Yangtze was still too short, and the foundation was too weak. For example, the problem of population alone was enough to stop all of his development paths. Just this morning, they received news from Resin City that the fleet sent out to search for rubber trees had returned, bringing back over 100 ships of rubber trees that could be transplanted. This great news was enough to prove that electricity could finally be put to use in Resin City. But even so, Yang Qindong couldn't help but feel a little melancholy, while feeling gratified. Now that he had the territory, if he didn't have enough population and army to support it, then it would still be a big problem. Before the real expansion began, how to get more people to Chichen City without outsiders knowing was the most important problem. Population. Thinking about this, Yang Qindong's mind quickly formed plans. The next morning, more than 7,000 allied troops set off from Guangzhou. Their target was Zhaoqing. As the Guangdong political envoy, Liu Youfu did not follow them. Instead, he sent the army off at the city gates. He was looking forward to this army thoroughly defeating, or even eliminating the Huang bandit army, allowing him to become the true Guangdong political envoy. The moment the army moved out, the scouts sent by the Huang bandits spread the news and headed straight for Zhaoqing Prefecture, which was several hundred li away. Huang Yuliang, who was in Zhaoqing, had already listened to Zhu Fangyong's suggestion and retreated to Wuzhou. At this moment, there were about 40,000 troops gathered in Wuzhou. Most of them were defeated soldiers outside of Guangzhou. After these days, the people who had fled from the defeat had all returned to Wuzhou. They wanted to make a comeback. Or it could be said that they didn't have much of a choice. The surrounding cities were all destroyed when they rebelled. With no one to plant the fertile land, how could they reap any harvest in autumn? Without food, surviving would be a problem. At least when they came to the Wuzhou prefecture, they would have food to eat. Although it was not a war and they only had 2 meals of porridge a day, as long as they did not starve to death and fainted, there was still hope, right? Chapter 381. For the sake of food and survival, there would be many people entering the Wuzhou prefecture every day under the banner of the Revolutionary Army. The bandit leader, Huang Yuliang, was overjoyed when he saw all of this. Regardless of the reason, these people were willing to seek refuge with him. At least he had made a name for himself. With a name, there would be people. With people, he could go around killing and pillaging. Food and money would flow into his hands endlessly. With this cycle, his territory would grow bigger and bigger, and his military strength would also grow. One day, it would not be impossible for him to ascend the throne and become an emperor. In order to achieve these goals, the first thing he had to do was to deal with the invaders. The news had already been sent over. When he learned that the Southern Ming Empire had sent over 7,000 soldiers to Zhaoqing Prefecture, Huang Yuliang laughed heartily. Only 7,000 people, and they dare to go against my army of 40,000? Do they really not want to live anymore? Huang Yuliang's laughter traveled to the various leaders in the tent. Naturally, everyone laughed along with him. In their eyes, these people were also not optimistic about the 7,000 Southern Ming Empire troops. At this moment, they seemed to have forgotten about their defeat outside the prefecture of Guangzhou. Of course, there were too many reasons why they had failed. For example, the other party had ambushed them and caught them off guard. However, now that they were prepared, they didn't believe that these 7,000 people would be able to turn into monsters. Young master, the Southern Ming Empire only sent over 7,000 people. I think they might not even be able to reach the Wuzhou prefecture. Zhaoqing Prefecture's General Cheng should be able to defeat them. One of the leaders saw that Huang Yuliang was in a good mood and hurriedly flattered him. The so-called General Cheng was one of the leaders of the Huang bandit army, Cheng Yuan. Cheng Yuan had some military talent. However, because he was slightly less experienced than Geng Jun and the other 3, he did not enter the ranks of the 4 heavenly kings. However, following Geng Jun's death, there were now calls for him to be a substitute and become one of the 4 heavenly kings. With such ability and charisma, Huang Yuliang sent 5,000 of his men to Zhaoqing Prefecture to test him. They were there to stop the Southern Ming Empire's army. The art of war said that once, twice, thrice and thrice, one would be exhausted. What was important was that if they couldn't work together in battle, the morale of the army would drop and the morale would be shaken. Naturally, their combat strength would be greatly reduced. Cheng Yuan and 5,000 troops were left behind in Zhaoqing Manor to achieve this goal. Of course, it would be best if he could win. It would be hard for Huang Bandit General to find any opponents in Guangdong. On the other hand, even if they lost, they would heavily injure their opponent and make ample preparations for the upcoming battle in Wuzhou. Not bad. Hearing someone mention Cheng Yuan, Huang Yuliang said excitedly, "This young master has already promised Cheng Yuan that as long as he can deal a heavy blow to the Southern Ming army, he will be allowed to enter the ranks of the 4 heavenly kings. I believe that he will not disappoint." Congratulations, young master. Congratulations on obtaining another good general. Everyone knew that since Huang Yuliang could say such words, the matter was basically settled. One by one, they began to praise him. As for how much of the praise was sincere and how much was sincere, it was up to the benevolent to see benevolence. Zhaoqing Manor. As a place that one had to pass through on their way to Wuzhou Manor, there were many Huang bandit soldiers standing on the city gate. Under the crowd was a man holding a long blade. He had a fierce expression and his eyes flashed with a bloodthirsty light. It was Cheng Yuan himself. The news that he was going to replace the dead Geng Jun as one of the 4 heavenly kings had long reached his ears. Recently, there were even more people around him who were fawning over him. At the beginning, he was still clear-headed. At least he knew his own worth. However, as more and more people began to praise him, he became complacent. Sometimes, even he couldn't help but believe the words of others. It was as though he was really a god that had descended from the heavens, was really brave, was really a genius at leading troops, and was really victorious in every battle. This was what people often said. False things could become true if too many people said them. Cheng Yuan, who started to become arrogant, became arrogant, frivolous, and underestimated the enemy. Even though he knew that the southern Ming reinforcements who had defeated Huang Yuliang's 80,000-strong army were coming, when he saw the southern Ming army gradually appearing from below the city gate, he still gave the order to open the city gate and attack. Men, bring this general's warhorse over. Let's see how I'll be defeated and take the enemy general's head amidst an army of 10,000. It seemed like he had watched too many dramas. At this moment, Cheng Yuan was filled with a heroic spirit. As he shouted, he waved the blade in his hand. General is mighty! General is mighty! As the main general was full of vigor, the soldiers below also had their morale boosted. They all shouted loudly with a face full of excitement. Amidst the shouts, the city gate of Zhaoqing Manor opened. Cheng Yuan, who was riding a war horse and holding a blade, only left behind 2,000 soldiers to defend the city. He brought 3,000 soldiers and horses out of the city gate. Their uniforms were messy, their weapons were all different, and they did not even have a formation. The 3,000 soldiers seemed to have come out in one go and followed behind Cheng Yuan. They did not look like a disciplined army at all. This is the Yellow Bandit Army? Guan Yin, who was standing in the opposite army, looked at the incoming people and asked curiously. When he turned around, he saw the neat ranks of the Ming army, their uniform. They were the 2,000 temporary auxiliary soldiers. Right now, they were also wearing the same Mandarin duck battle jacket as the Southern Ming Army uniform. The only difference was that they had a wide red cloth tied around their arms to make the difference. This was something that couldn't be helped. An army couldn't bring too many empty uniforms with them. Even though every Lung Feng and auxiliary soldier had a set of uniforms, they couldn't possibly give them to these temporary auxiliary soldiers. Even if they wanted to, it would not be enough. It was better to let them wear the Ming Army's uniform first. After all, there were many such things in the Guangzhou Manor's military storage. Secondly, it was to differentiate them. Everything could be changed the next time they replenished their supplies. Did they want to change out of the Ming Army's uniform at that time? Good. Then they needed to perform well. Of course, this was Yang Qindong's idea. With a large warehouse in his hands, he could take out more uniforms at any time. However, he would not do so. It was not worth it to attract suspicion for no reason. Speaking of which, this was the first time Guan Yin had truly fought with the Yellow Bandit Army. The previous battle was in the dark. By the time he arrived at the battlefield, everything had already ended. Even though he saw some dead or captured Yellow Bandit soldiers, he did not have any direct impression of them. It was not like now where he could see everything in his mind at a glance. Guan Yin's doubtful words were heard by the 2,000 temporary auxiliary soldiers standing beside him. Their faces turned red and feverish. It seemed to be doubt, but in reality, the words of disdain made them feel ashamed. When they thought about how they had been proud to stay in this kind of army, they felt even more ashamed. Yang Qindong felt the change in the 2,000 temporary auxiliary soldiers. He also knew that when Guan Yin said these words, it was not intentional. It was just his feelings. He had no intention of blaming anyone. Instead, he said to Luo Pe, the commander of the 2nd Cold Front Regiment beside him, "Commander Luo, in a moment, choose the 1st company as the main attack. Then, choose 2 companies of auxiliary soldiers and bring 2,000 temporary auxiliary soldiers. Do you have confidence in taking down Zhaoqing Manor? Please be at ease, Imperial Envoy. If we cannot take it down, we will bring our heads to you." Luo Pe, who had been instructed earlier, changed his title to Yang Qindong. Amidst a wave of impassioned words, he gave a standard military salute and turned to pick out the generals. "Imperial Envoy, do we not need to send troops? Isn't it a little too little to send only 2,000 people?" Ma Wei, who knew the mercenary army's military structure, rode forward and carefully probed. "Yes, why don't we also send 2,000 people to help?" Guan Yin nodded. It was obvious that he agreed with Ma Wei's words. "There's no need." Yang Qindong shook his head resolutely and did not say anything else. He only looked at Zhaoqing Manor with a half-smile. No one knew what he was thinking. Luopa turned around and returned to the camp to pick out the generals. When they found out that they could only bring 1 company of Cold Front Regiment and 2 companies of auxiliary soldiers, a total of 4 company commanders of Cold Front Regiment, and 8 company commanders of auxiliary soldiers instantly burst into an uproar. According to them, no matter how many companies were chosen to participate in the battle, they would definitely have a share. There were only 3 places, but the 12 company commanders all wanted to fight for it. Perhaps they also understood that there were not many opportunities to perform, or perhaps they were very confident in the soldiers they led. But no matter what, only a quarter of them could go to the battlefield. The majority of them did not have such an opportunity. If they did not fight for it, they would have even less of a chance. Obey orders. Seeing that the 12 company commanders had surrounded him, Luopa glared and a murderous aura exuded from his body, causing those company commanders who wanted to say something to immediately shut their mouths. Obeying orders and orders was the first lesson that every soldier had to learn after becoming an auxiliary soldier. It was also something that every soldier of the Yang family army had to do. Now that Luopa mentioned it, the reminder was very obvious. It was also a sign that he was about to get angry. Luopa only said 4 words and everyone quieted down. This made him very satisfied. He then turned his gaze to the auxiliary regiment commander Lu Zhua and said, "Regiment Commander Lu, you can decide which 2 companies of auxiliary soldiers to send." "Yes," Lu Zhua replied. Although they were both regimental commanders, Luopa was from the Cold Front Regiment while he was from the auxiliary regiment. One could imagine the difference between them. Even if he really went to the Cold Front Regiment, whether or not he could become a battalion commander would depend on luck. Chapter 382. The 2 regiment commanders worked together and quickly picked out 3 companies to fight. Together with the 2,000 temporary auxiliary soldiers, there were a total of 2,300 people ready to fight. Among the 3,300 people, the company at the forefront was the Cold Vanguard Company led by Battalion Commander Chunbo. Luopa had taken a step back this time, giving the opportunity to charge and break through the enemy lines to his battalion commander. Chunbo's eyes shone brightly as he seized the opportunity with great difficulty. He felt as if there was an endless amount of energy in his body. When he thought about how the 6th young master was watching his performance on the battlefield behind him and his every move, he felt an inexplicable excitement all over his body. Pengyu was in the Cold Vanguard Company. Due to his outstanding performance on the battlefield, he had been selected by the 6th young master as a member of the Cold Vanguard Company. This time, he had to perform outstandingly to repay the trust and support. Pengyu was not the only one. The Cold Vanguard Company was also filled with energy. Since they were able to join the Cold Vanguard Company, they naturally had the right to know who the 6th young master was. Yang Chendong's appearance was like a shot of adrenaline to them, causing them to be extremely excited. The 2 auxiliary battalions were in the middle, following behind the Cold Vanguard Company. They would be the main attackers when the battle started. After all, the weapons in their hands were crossbows that were slightly closer to the enemy. If they wanted to be effective, then they had to rush to the front of the enemy. Although there were only 200 of them, all of them were filled with confidence. It was not for any other reason, but because they believed in their comrades and the marksmanship of the Cold Vanguard Company members who would be assisting them on the battlefield. If anyone dared to counterattack or threaten their lives, the Cold Vanguard Company would definitely step in and take care of the enemy one by one. Standing at the very back were the 2,000 temporary auxiliary soldiers. Compared to a few days ago, they now looked like soldiers standing there. The military training made them look more upright and straight. The grievances meeting reminded them not to forget the past, and to remember to strive for a better future. After eating and drinking well, each of them had a ruddy complexion. When they thought about becoming real auxiliary soldiers, they would have the opportunity to follow the auxiliary soldiers back to their headquarters and live a fair and just life without having to worry about food and drink. They became even more excited. It was as if the goal of their lives had already appeared. In order to live a happy life in the future, they had to perform well in this battle. With their fighting spirit and morale, they tightened their grip on the crossbows in their hands. Although the crossbows in their hands couldn't be compared to the auxiliary soldiers, regardless of whether it was shooting distance or accuracy, they were still much better than the rusty knives, hoes and wooden sticks they used in the Huang bandit army. With such excellent weapons, they would definitely win this battle. The 2,300 soldiers all had their own ideas, but they were all thinking about how to fight this battle well, and how to perform even more bravely. Behind them were the 900 Lung Feng and auxiliary soldiers. They stood motionless on the spot, like soldiers who had died many years ago in the Terracotta Army. There was no expression on their faces. They were waiting for an order to come out and take care of any opponents or enemies who wanted to threaten their safety. The 4,000 Ming soldiers stood on the right side of the formation. They craned their necks and waited to see the changes on the battlefield. Ma Wei and Guanning widened their eyes, as if they did not want to miss a single moment. They wanted to see how these mercenaries would perform. Behind these people were Yang Chendong's family. They sat in a few carriages. Tai Qingyi led a group of female soldiers to protect them. At the same time, there was a squad of Lung Feng who looked around vigilantly to prevent any suspicious people from approaching. In the carriages, the curtains of the 3 carriages were lifted. They were the first wife, Hu Yan, the third wife, Lady Shui, and Miss Su Maner. Even though Yang Chendong had said that there would be no mercy on the battlefield, and that the scene would be a little terrifying, the 3 of them could not help but look at the battlefield out of curiosity. This was especially so for Su Maner. She knew very well what her mission was. She also knew what would happen to her once she completed her mission. Right now, she wanted to see if the person she was scheming against was worth it for her to complete her mission at the cost of her life. She wanted to see if it was worth it for her to be buried with him. Coincidentally, when Su Maner's gaze landed on Yang Chendong, the man, who had changed into a set of capable camouflage clothes, raised his right hand. Then he placed it down gently, looking extremely elegant. Following this action, the 2,300 soldiers surged forward in an orderly manner. When the 2,300 people stepped on the same spot and spread out in a straight line, they looked like a long dragon from afar. It gave off an awe-inspiring feeling. Any object would be very spectacular and beautiful when they were in an orderly manner. It was just like the wild geese in the sky. When they were about to return, regardless of whether they were in a straight line or in a straight line, they would give off a spectacular sight, let alone a formation formed by 2,300 soldiers. General Ma Wei, who saw this scene, gasped. He did not expect that with just over 2,000 people, once they moved in unison, they would create such a shocking force. When he was leading the Guangdong Guards, he had also undergone training in this area. However, as the military discipline was not very strict, not to mention over 2,000 people, even a casual formation of 1,000 people or a formation of 100 people would not be able to be in an orderly manner. Their steps would also not be in the same spot like they were now. Naturally, their might would be much weaker. He could not help but look at Guanning, who was riding a horse at the side. He realized that the other party was also deep in thought. This official from the Ministry of War, who had just been promoted to a 5th-rank official, was also shocked by the scene in front of him. As someone in the Ministry of War, his vision was not like Ma Wei's, who only focused on one city in Guangdong. What he was thinking about was whether this uniform formation could be used in all of the Southern Ming Empire's armies. If it was possible, would their fighting strength increase? Even his own people were shocked, let alone the opponent, Cheng Yuan. He rode on a horse and held a large blade in his hand. He looked very majestic, but when he saw the enemy move and the mountain-like aura pressing down on him, for some reason, his heart could not help but beat rapidly. A feeling of fear began to spread throughout his body. This feeling of fear quickly affected the warhorse under him. It was said that animals had a sense of fear towards danger. At this time, it also seemed to have sensed the endless danger. It began to snort and its body was also twisting, as if it wanted to escape and did not want to face this terrifying pressure. Not only Cheng Yuan and his warhorse, even the 3,000 Huang bandits behind him were intimidated by this aura at this moment. Some of the more timid ones even began to walk unsteadily. From the looks of it, It was clear that they wanted to return to the city. It was as if with the city wall, they would be able to ensure their safety. Cheng Yuan also wanted to return, but when he thought about how he was going to enter the 4 heavenly kings, if he did not do anything and was scared back into the city by the enemy's aura, once this matter spread out, how would he have the face to see others? He was afraid that from now on, no one would look up to him anymore. Whether it was for his own dignity or for his future glory, he had no reason to retreat. Furthermore, who said that if the formation was orderly, their fighting strength would be strong? Could it be that the embroidered pillow was useless? Perhaps with a single charge he would be able to mess up the formation. After all, on the battlefield, one's methods were more powerful than one's formation. Steeling his resolve to fight, Cheng Yuan raised the long saber in his hand high and shouted, "Everyone, listen to my orders. Follow me and kill our way over. If we win this battle, everyone will return to the city to drink, eat and play. Women kill. Men die for wealth, birds die for food." A beautiful future was right in front of them. In addition, Cheng Yuan took the lead and charged out. The 3,000 yellow bandits behind him also relied on their morale to shout and charge out. As Cheng Yuan led his troops out, the distance between the two sides quickly closed. However, one side was like a tidal wave, while the other side was like a towering boulder. It was as if no one could shake it. Visually, it gave off such a feeling. At the very least, if they really clashed, the victor would depend on whether the tidal wave was stronger or the boulder was sturdier. Charge, charge. The yellow bandits' running speed was not slow, especially when Cheng Yuan personally led his troops to charge at the front. The people behind him seemed to have eaten a bear's heart and leopard's guts, gaining more courage and strength. In the past, when they faced the southern Ming army, they charged like this. In their view, as long as the main general was brave and the soldiers under him fought with their lives, with the advantage of numbers, this battle could still be fought and they could still win. The sounds of killing could already be heard clearly. The distance between the two sides was less than 500 meters. Facing the chaotic roars, Battalion Commander Chen Bo, who was walking at the front, had a firm expression. He was not affected by the changes in the other side, and continued to take powerful steps forward. The front army did not move, so the auxiliary soldiers and temporary auxiliary soldiers at the back naturally did not change. Even though a grave expression appeared in the eyes of some people, the formation was still orderly and there was not the slightest hint of chaos. The distance between the two sides was only 300 meters. According to the Ming Dynasty's ratio of 1 foot to the present day, it was only 300 meters. The shooting range of the U-5 rifle was 45 degrees. After flying for about 4,000 meters, it began to fall. Of course, this was not the effective range. Under the effective range, as long as one could see, 800 meters was not a problem. Within 600 meters, one could easily take a person's life. Now that the distance was less than 300 meters, it was time to attack. Some of the platoon leaders and squad leaders who understood the reasoning behind this looked at Battalion Commander Chen Bo. Chapter 383. How could Chen Bo not know that they could shoot now? However, this time he only had a company of cold vanguards. They could fight to their heart's content, but if they did that, what would happen to the auxiliary soldiers and the 2,000 auxiliary soldiers? Because their loyalty did not undergo the final test, they only had crossbows in their hands, which had a lethality of 150 meters. In other words, if Chen Bo gave the order to attack now, they would be able to heavily injure the enemy, but the auxiliary soldiers would have a hard time fighting. That was why Chen Bo did not give the order to attack immediately. He was calculating in his mind. A normal crossbow had a damage range of 120 meters, and its effective range was around 100 meters. As long as he could control the range of the crossbow beyond 120 meters, he would still have the initiative. That way, more auxiliary soldiers would have a chance to perform. After some calculations, the distance between the two sides increased from 300 meters to 200 meters, then 180 meters, 170 meters. More cold vanguards started to look at the battalion commander Chen Bo, waiting for him to give the order to shoot. This was something that only the elite cold vanguards could do. Without orders from their superiors, even if the enemy was right in front of them, they could not simply shoot. Otherwise, they would be severely punished by military law. 150 meters was within the range of the auxiliary soldiers' crossbows. Chun Bo waved his right hand, and the 100 cold vanguards stopped in their tracks. Release the safety and prepare to fire. Auxiliary soldiers, continue forward. Once the gunshot is heard, attack immediately. Don't give the enemy a chance to react. Finally, the order to attack was given. The 100 cold vanguards pulled the safety of their 95 shots in unison. The sound of the guns being fired was crisp and pleasing to the ear. While they were doing that, the 200 auxiliary soldiers and 2,000 auxiliary soldiers rushed out from their sides like carps crossing the river. They charged straight at the Huang bandit army. At a distance of 150 meters, the two sides were still closing in. The 500 archers in the Huang bandit army were ready to fire their arrows. General Cheng Yuan, who was leading the charge on his horse, was also ready to shout out the command to fire. 140 meters, 130 meters, crossbows ready. Fire! A voice that was a step faster than Cheng Yuan's came from Chen Bo's ears. Following the order, hundreds of tongues of flame spewed out. Their targets were Cheng Yuan, who was on his horse, and the Huang bandits who were preparing to shoot. There were also 200 auxiliary soldiers working together with him. They had already aimed their crossbows at the archers. This was the group of people who posed the greatest threat to them. As long as they could take them all down, the control of the battlefield would definitely fall into their hands. At that time, they would be able to kill as they pleased. Ba ba ba. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The sound of gunfire and crossbow bolts pierced through the air almost at the same time, causing Cheng Yuan to fall off his horse, the archers to fall to the ground, and the Huang bandit army to descend into chaos. No one would have thought that the mighty General Cheng Yuan would fall off his horse without even touching the hair of his opponent. Their general was wearing armor and could not be injured by ordinary arrows, but why was he still so careless? Without a leader, the Huang bandit army appeared to be in chaos. Another junior leader wanted to take over the command of the army, but his influence was too small to make the entire army listen to his orders. Not to mention, as the second wave of gunfire and crossbow bolts rang out, the junior leader also fell to the ground with a plop. Kill. Cheng Yuan is dead. Those who resist will be killed. Those who surrender will live. Seeing the enemy's generals fall to the ground one after another, the 202,000 auxiliary soldiers charged over with a momentum that could topple mountains and overturn seas. Along the way, they were like a hot knife through butter. Every time the sound of gunfire or crossbow bolts rang out, there would be people on the other side falling to the ground. This kind of situation where they had lost 7 to 8% of their forces without even fighting caused the morale of the Huang bandit army to plummet again and again. They were originally a motley crew. Their original goal of joining the Huang bandit army was not pure. They only wanted to eat their fill, and did not even know what to do after eating. How could an untrained army with no goals, no ideals, no pursuits, no beliefs be a match for the Yang family army? Even if they were facing temporary auxiliary soldiers who had vague goals in life, they would not be a match for them. With the sound of crossbow bolts piercing through the air, they did not even need to engage in close combat. They could kill their opponents from far away. Then they would load the crossbow bolts and shoot. Every time this happened, the Huang bandit army would fall to the ground after being hit by the crossbow bolts. In this kind of near one-sided slaughter, under the situation where they had lost the support of their own archers, only death would await them if they continued to resist. At this moment, there were finally people who could not endure the fear because they did not know when they would fall. They also did not know if the next one to fall would be them. Since surrendering would allow them to live, there was no need to hesitate. Groups of people began to throw away the weapons in their hands and kneel on the ground. Good. Behind them, Yang Chendong used his binoculars to observe everything. Seeing that Cheng Yuan had fallen from his horse and the Huang bandit army was in chaos, he waved his hand and said to Luo Pe, "You can attack the city now. Go." Yes. Luo Pe, who had been waiting impatiently for a long time, was waiting for these words. At this moment, other than leaving a company of cold vanguards to protect Yang Chendong's central army, the other two companies of cold vanguards rushed out like war horses. Some of them were even carrying things that Guanyin and Ma Wei did not recognize and did not know what they were for. Let's go, we can also advance. I believe that within 2 hours, we will be able to eat in Zhaoqing's residence. Yang Chendong chuckled with a face full of confidence. Yes, the mercenaries are really powerful. Guanyin and Ma Wei agreed, but no matter how one listened, they seemed to be perfunctory. After all, only Cheng Yuan and the soldiers he brought out of the city were defeated. There were still 2,000 Huang bandit army defending the city. How could it be taken down so easily? One had to know that a siege would consume the most time and energy, as well as the source of soldiers. If things went wrong, a city would be surrounded for 10 days, half a month, or even longer. It would be normal for the city not to fall. No matter what Guanyin and Ma Wei thought, Yang Chendong was still very confident on his horse. It was as if he was not going to watch the battle, but directly entering the city. At this moment, Luopa was leading 2 companies of cold vanguards to rush forward. As he ran, he encouraged the cold vanguards beside him. Everyone hurry up. The 6th young master is right behind us. When the 6th young master arrives, the city gates will be broken. Don't delay the 6th young master's arrival. After mentioning the 6th young master 3 times, it seemed to be a little long-winded. However, to the cold vanguards, it was the most encouraging words. At least at this moment, because everyone heard the name of the 6th young master, their speed increased. Cheng Yuan's army was defeated and captured. Most of his men were either killed, injured, or surrendered. Less than 800 of them actually escaped. These people risked their lives to reach the city gates of Zhaoqing Prefecture, and shouted for the city guards to lower the drawbridge. Unfortunately, the auxiliary and temporary auxiliary soldiers behind them had already caught up. The Huang bandit army in the city did not dare to open the city gates. Seeing that there was no hope of entering the city, the 800 deserters were afraid that they would be killed on the battlefield. One by one, they threw down their weapons and knelt down to surrender. Thus, the 3,000 Huang bandit army soldiers became prisoners of war. After bringing these people to the side, Battalion Commander Chun Bo led a company of cold vanguards to the city gates. Listen up, we are the mercenaries hired by the Duke of Loyal Courage of the Great Ming Dynasty. In the Guangzhou Prefecture, the 80,000 soldiers led by Huang Yuliang were also heavily injured by us. If you know what's good for you, immediately open the city gates, and you will be considered to have made a military contribution. Otherwise, you will be punished for breaching the city gates. There were many ways to persuade the enemy to open the city gates. The soft way was to tempt them with benefits and say all sorts of nice things. The hard way was to use a harsh tone and use threatening words. However, there were too few examples of people being able to persuade the enemy to open the city gates with just a few words. For example, the 2,000 Huang bandit army soldiers had no intention of opening the city gates. When Cheng Yuan fell off his horse, they noticed that something was wrong, and had already sent people to the Wuzhou Prefecture to ask for help. As long as young Master Huang received the news and arrived with his troops, the crisis in Zhaoqing Prefecture would naturally be resolved. Chun Bo stood at the foot of the city gates and shouted 3 times. However, no one used words to reply to him. Instead, a few arrows were shot in front of his feet. This was because the distance was not enough. Otherwise, Chun Bo would have been injured. You're courting death. Chun Bo felt like he had been slapped in the face when he saw a few arrows stuck in the ground 7 or 8 meters away from him. His face turned ashen. Men, kill those who shot the arrows for me. Yes, battalion commander. Among the cold vanguard, there were people who could not wait to test their skills. Now that they had Chun Bo's orders, there was no need for them to hold back. They laughed and raised their guns to shoot. A Huang bandit army soldier who was holding a bow and arrow on top of the city gate tower unfortunately became the target. Before he could pull his arms back, he heard a crisp gunshot. He was shot between his eyebrows and fell from the city gate tower. This was only the beginning. Following that, the other cold vanguard soldiers began to search for their own targets. Within the time it took for a stick of incense to burn, 9 Huang bandit army soldiers who wanted to shoot arrows were killed. They either fell from the city gate tower, or died within the city gate tower. The deaths of these people shocked the Huang bandit army soldiers who were guarding the city. It also shocked the 2,000 auxiliary soldiers who were watching from the side. The battle just now had been extremely satisfying and smooth. The situation had been one-sided from beginning to end. Many of them had not felt any danger, and had won the battle. However, this kind of shock was not as great as what they saw in front of them. When they saw that every Huang bandit army soldier who was exposed on top of the city gate tower would quickly fall to the ground and die, they finally understood what the cold vanguard represented. In the past, they had always heard the auxiliary soldiers talk about how powerful the cold vanguard was and did not think much of it. Now it seemed that everything was true. It was just that their vision was too narrow and they could not imagine it. Chapter 384. Ba Daojiang was also among the auxiliary soldiers. The scene in front of him shocked him as well. As a martial artist with decent martial arts skills, he used to be very conceited. In a one-on-one fight, there were very few people who could convince him. But now, after witnessing such accurate and miraculous marksmanship, he knew that those so-called martial arts experts, when faced with such an accurate gun that could easily take a person's life from several hundred feet away, most likely would not have the slightest bit of advantage, and could only be slaughtered by others. No, I have such good stuff too. As long as I am willing to put in the effort to train, I will also become a sharpshooter like this. Ba Daojiang set a goal for himself in his heart. Not only him, but many of the auxiliary soldiers also had the same idea. At this moment, they were more eager than ever to join the mercenary army. If in the past they only wanted to fill their stomachs, now they had a higher goal. They wanted to become the strongest soldiers in the world. Under Chen Bo and Lung Feng's gunfire, the Huang bandit army suffered losses and no one dared to show their faces. At this moment, Commander Luo Po led 2 companies of Lung Feng and rushed over. "Commander, give me an hour. I will lead Lung Feng and charge into the city. We will definitely take down the city." When Chen Bo saw that Commander Luo Po had arrived, he stepped forward and volunteered. "How are we going to take down the city without scaling ladders?" "Alright, you've already done very well. Look at me now." Luo Po patted Chen Bo's shoulder. He had given Chen Bo a chance to perform well just now. Now it should be his turn. A higher rank would be able to suppress others. Not to mention that he had just performed a meritorious deed. If it was his turn, it should be Luo Po's turn. Chen Bo immediately led the troops from before to the side. Commander Luo Po was left behind. He confidently led 200 elite Lung Feng to the city gate tower. At some point, a loudspeaker had appeared in his hand. He first glanced behind him and waited for the 200 soldiers to get into formation. When they were ready, he raised his head to look at the city gate tower and shouted, "The people on the city gate, listen up. Now that your Cheng Yuan has been captured, you are just cornered beasts. If you open the city gate now, you can still redeem yourselves. But if you wait until we reach the city gate, you will all die without a burial place. I'll give you 10 breaths of time to make your decision. Men, prepare the rocket launchers." The 200 cold vanguard soldiers had been waiting for this order for a long time. As soon as Luo Po's voice fell, 5 cold vanguard soldiers walked out from the ranks. Each of them carried a 40-0 rocket launcher on their shoulders. They raised the launchers and aimed them at the city tower. The rest of the cold vanguard soldiers held the 9.5 in their hands as they stared at the city gate tower. If anyone dared to show themselves, they would not hesitate to shoot. The 40-0 rocket launcher, commonly known as the 40-0 fire, had a diameter of 40 millimeters, a mass of 5.6 kilograms, a length of 910 millimeters, a diameter of 85 millimeters, a mass of 2.1 kilogram, and a firing distance of 300 m. Although the 40-0 fire had a high requirement for stability when firing from a kneeling or standing position, it was still a convenient and portable siege weapon. After all, it was very powerful. As long as they had control of the battlefield, they could fire at will. After the 540 fire cannons were adjusted, the first cannonball rose into the air and smashed into the city tower of Zhaoqing City. Boom! A huge flame suddenly lit up. Even though it was daytime, there was still a flash of flame. When it landed on the city wall, not only did it create a huge crater, the powerful explosion also caused people's ears to ring and their hearts to palpitate, causing them to tremble in fear. With just one shell, the Huang bandit soldiers on the city gate tower trembled. They did not dare to look down from the city gate tower. Naturally, they did not know what it was that brought about such power. However, their instincts told them that this thing was very powerful and would not be easy to deal with. On the other hand, the soldiers below the city, no matter if it was the 2,000 temporary soldiers, the 4,000 Ming army soldiers, or the thousands of Huang bandit soldiers that were just captured, they were all frightened by the formation in front of them. What kind of cannon was this? How could it have such power? Moreover, it looked so small and convenient. It could really be called a godly weapon in the army. With one shell, rocks flew everywhere, causing the city gate tower to become silent. Then a second and a third shot were fired. One of the shots hit the battlements of the city wall. Not only did it destroy a piece of the battlements, but it also sent rubble flying in all directions, injuring many of the Huang bandits who were hiding there. Still not surrendering? You only have 4 breaths of time. Luopa looked at the results of the 40 fire, and his eyes were filled with confidence. He dropped his hand and another rocket launcher flew onto the city wall, causing a piece of the city wall to fly away. We surrender. Don't fight anymore. We surrender. With just 4 cannonballs, the morale of the Huang bandit army on the city wall was completely crushed. They did not dare to show their faces and could not fight back. They could only wait for their deaths. This battle was very cowardly. Rather than waiting for their deaths, it was better to surrender. That way, they would be able to save their lives. As for whether young Master Huang would punish them after they lost Zhaoqing Manor, he should go find General Cheng Yuan, and not these normal soldiers. With the sudden appearance of the 40 fire, Zhaoqing Manor gave up. Even the city gate was not affected. By the time Yang Qindong, Guaning, and General Ma Wei arrived, the city gate was already wide open. Lung Feng and the other soldiers had already entered to maintain order and capture the captives. Outside the city gate, there were only 4,000 Ming army soldiers, 100 auxiliary soldiers, and 400 temporary soldiers guarding the captives. When Ma Wei arrived and saw that none of his subordinates had entered the city, he couldn't help but ask angrily, "Why didn't you all enter the city? Why are you all guarding outside?" "General, they didn't let us in. They said that they wanted to organize the military resources in the city before letting us in." A Chiliarch ran in front of Ma Wei and said with an aggrieved expression, "That's right. I'm sure General Ma knows that His Majesty did not give the mercenaries any military funds. He allowed us to take what we want first when we occupy a piece of land. General Guaning knows about this." Yang Qindong saw this scene and said with a smile. On the side, when Guaning heard Yang Qindong mention his name, he could only say with a bitter expression, "Yes, His Majesty did allow this." Seeing that Guaning and Ma Wei were unhappy, Yang Qindong knew that this was caused by the imbalance in their hearts. He immediately said, "Forget it. Let the mercenaries pick first. As for the military merits, they can all go to you. That bandit leader Cheng Yuan can also be given to you. At least, how you write the battle report is up to you. Write it as beautifully as possible. Even if all the military merits are given to you, I don't care. What do you think?" Yang Qindong made a concession. Only then did Guaning and Ma Wei's faces show some joy. If there were no military merits and no loot, then there really was no point in coming. Fortunately, they could still get some benefits. They didn't have to spend much effort or risk their lives. This was a pretty good result. After thinking this through, the two of them cupped their fists and bowed to Yang Qindong to express their gratitude. Yang Qindong made a concession and had Guaning draft the battle report for him to look over. Most of it recorded how brave and good the Ming army was in battle. Regarding this, the imperial envoy did not have any objections. Guaning and Ma Wei sent the battle report to Jingdo with the fastest speed of 800 li. A few days later, There were fast horses entering the city from Jingdo. Along the way, they shouted the Guangdong victory report and headed straight for the royal palace. When the common people passing by saw this scene, not a single one of them was not excited and encouraged. They sighed in their hearts that Ingzong was indeed the legitimate emperor. He had won battle after battle. It looked like the chaos in the south would be resolved soon. In the royal palace, Zhu Qizhen saw the battle report. Seeing that they had used less than half a day to take back Xiaoqing Manor, and had killed and captured nearly 10,000 enemies, he was immediately overjoyed. He gave Guan Ying and Ma Wei, who had performed meritorious service, a reward and encouraged them to continue to work hard to completely destroy the yellow bandits as soon as possible. From beginning to end, Zhu Qizhen still did not mention Yang Qindong. It was as if this person did not even exist. It was as if the victory at the front had nothing to do with this Duke of Loyalty and the imperial envoy. In reality, everyone had a balance in their hearts. This victory had a lot to do with the Duke of Loyalty and courage. If not, why did they always retreat in defeat before? Could they really achieve victory after victory now? However, the emperor's heart was fickle. If he did not mention Yang Qindong's meritorious service, who would dare to? There were even some people who thought that once the yellow bandits were destroyed, would it be time to burn the bridge after crossing the river? This kind of thing had happened countless times in the history of the dynasties, where the bow was put away after the birds had flown away. Jingdo's Ingzong had won the battle, and was naturally very happy. Master Huang Yuliang of Wuzhou had an ugly expression after losing Xiaoqing Manor. Thinking back to when he had led a large number of soldiers to surround and attack Xiaoqing Manor, it had taken over a dozen days. Afterwards, it was only because Xiaoqing's general, Jia Ping, was greedy for life and took the initiative to abandon the city. This gave him the opportunity to enter the city and take over the city. But now, the South Ming army had taken over the city in half a day. In comparison, didn't it seem that he was too incompetent? What do we do? What do we do? In the manor's main hall, Huang Yuliang summoned a group of leaders and asked the people below him. When things were going smoothly, these leaders would all lead the soldiers in battle and display a brave and fearless appearance. But after suffering successive defeats, when he asked who would counterattack Xiaoqing Manor, not a single person answered. It was clear that these people were all frightened and were afraid from the bottom of their hearts. Sitting high up, Huang Yuliang asked a few questions in succession. What do we do? The people below still did not answer. In a flustered and exasperated state, he wanted to call out a general. It was at this time that Zhu Fangyong, one of his trusted aides, stood out. Young master, I have something to say. Chapter 385. Oh, are you willing to head to Xiaoqing Manor and fight with the Ming army? Finally, someone had jumped out. Huang Yuliang felt much more comforted, and his gaze toward Zhu Fangyong was filled with more hope. No. Zhu Fangyong shook his head. Seeing that Zhu Fangyong had not stepped out to help him, anger flashed across Huang Yuliang's face. Before Huang Yuliang could say anything, Zhu Fangyong had already said, Young master, forgive me for speaking bluntly, but since Xiaoqing Manor has been taken, it will be extremely difficult to take it back. Since we are wasting soldiers on this, why not do something else? Something else? What do you mean? Confusion appeared in Huang Yuliang's eyes. I am thinking that the morale of the South Ming army is at its peak. After winning 2 battles in a row, the morale of the army is at its peak. Facing this army, it is not easy for us to fight them head-on. We should think of other methods. The art of war says that the first time will weaken, and the third time will be exhausted. As long as we can use the city to stop them, as time goes on, the morale of the army will be disrupted. At that time, it will be time for us to counterattack. Standing there, Zhu Fangyong spoke with a righteous expression, and did not show any fear. Once he spoke, he immediately received the support of the other generals. Yes, General Zhu is right. The morale of the Ming army is at its peak, and it is not easy to fight them head-on. The people who could say such things were naturally afraid of the Ming army. Cheng Yuan's martial prowess was much higher than theirs, But he still could not defeat the Ming army. If they went, wouldn't it be the same as going to their deaths? All of the generals said such things. Huang Yuliang knew in his heart that even if he gave a death order for anyone to lead the troops, they would most likely lose and would only damage their own strength. However, he was still unwilling to just defend like this, so he asked, "Then according to General Zhu, we can only wait for them to attack in Wuzhou City?" "Of course not. Although we can't do anything to the Ming army at the front, the other armies can take action. For example, we can send General Cui Yan, who is outside the city, to lead troops into Mengzhu Ridge, which is between Pinghuafu and Xiaozhoufu. Passing through there, we can avoid fighting with the Ming army's main force and also push the battle line out. Once we enter Yongzhoufu in the Huguang area, we will be free like birds flying in the sky. We can greatly expand our army there. At that time, whether we continue to attack cities and seize land to expand our influence, or bring the newly arrived troops back to Guangdong, the initiative will be in our hands. There is also General Sun Jianglong in Gaozhoufu and Lijiaofu. We can order him to launch an attack on the Guanghai guards, and thus attack Guangzhoufu to divide the Ming army's strength and destroy them one by one. Also, we can arrange for General Ru Honghai in Xuanzhoufu to advance toward Nanningfu in Guangxi, and also toward Liuzhoufu. There is also another benefit. Once Wuzhou City is in danger, we can retreat toward Guangxi to avoid the danger and make plans. After speaking so much, Zhu Fangyong turned to Huang Yuliang and said, "This way, we will be spreading out everywhere and forcing the Ming army to send reinforcements everywhere. At that time, our chance will come. We can gather a large number of troops to attack one place and reverse the current disadvantageous situation." Zhu Fangyong's words were clear and logical. In Huang Yuliang's ears, it was quite feasible. He was even fantasizing that once the plan came true, the power in his hands would more than double. At that time, he would be able to stand up against Yunnan's Min Zhuangwang Zhu Huiying. Then it would not be impossible for him to conquer the world. Good. General Zhu's plan is good. Immediately write letters to the heavenly kings. I want to spread out everywhere on the battlefield. I want the Ming army to be tired of dealing with them. I want the world to know my power. Huang Yuliang laughed in praise. It was as if he had already become the master of the world. Congratulations, young master. The other generals in the hall also flattered him, causing waves of laughter to erupt. Fast horses left the Wuzhou house and headed in all directions. Before long, Guangdong, Guangxi, and even Huguang would become chaotic. At that time, the Ming Empire would not have the energy to send a large army to deal with the Wuzhou house. Zhaoqing House. A new round of evaluation and selection was going on. Of the 5,000 soldiers that Cheng Yuan had brought with him, 4,500 remained unscathed in this battle. They had all become captives. Among these people, there was no lack of strong and healthy people. In this aspect, one had to say that Cheng Yuan cared about his subordinates. As for their food and drink, he did not take away much. Now these people had all become good soldiers. First, there was registration. Then there was an investigation. There was also the process of exposing each other. Among the 2,000 people who had become temporary soldiers, some were familiar with these brothers. With their help, the evaluation went even smoother. In the end, 1,000 of the 4,500 people were chosen to become temporary soldiers. The other 3,500 people were given to Guan Ying and Ma Wei as usual. Yang Chendong did not lack useless soldiers. These people would eat a lot every day. It was better to leave the headache to others. Choose and see if there are any who are willing to become soldiers. If there are, investigate their backgrounds. Guaning discussed with Ma Wei. With the 2,000 temporary soldiers that Yang Chendong had taken in as an example, the two of them could see the importance of captives. If there were two things that they could not ignore in the Battle of Zhaoqing, it would be the appearance of the 4-0 fires and the performance of the temporary soldiers. Mercenaries were very powerful in all aspects. Guaning and Ma Wei already had enough knowledge of this. However, the 2,000 temporary soldiers had only been in the military camp for a few days, and had only gone through a few days of training. They could not understand how they could display such strong killing intent on the battlefield. Why was it that even though they had both joined the army, once they joined the mercenary group, they would change so drastically? They couldn't figure out the logic behind it, but they could at least imitate it. They just had to learn from it. As for the two generals starting to recruit soldiers from the captives, Yang Qindong only smiled when he heard the report from his subordinates. Pass down the order. Organize the new temporary auxiliary soldiers, and teach them culture using the method of the old leading the new. At the same time, tell them that culture is also very important. Whether they can become a member of the mercenary army in the future, this assessment cannot be ignored. If there is any obvious improvement, consider adding 3 pieces of fatty meat to their meal. Yang Qindong was very observant. This might have something to do with the fact that he was the most outstanding member of the Cold Vanguard Special Forces in his previous life. When carrying out special missions, being more attentive and observant could save one's life during crucial moments. It was precisely because of his meticulous observation that he noticed that whenever it was time to eat, the temporary auxiliary soldiers, who rarely ate their fill, would stare at the fatty meat on the plate without blinking. Some of them would even drool without any form of restraint. Most of the time, the reward was the most important thing. In other words, the reward had to be something the other party liked and needed. For example, if you asked a rich merchant to do something for you, and you only said that you would reward him with a certain amount of silver, the effect might not be much. However, if you said that you could give him an official position after he did a good job, then it would be completely different. Perhaps the other party would do the job, well, even if he had to pay for it. This was what it meant to reward something. Since the temporary soldiers were so greedy for fatty meat, he would use this as a guide. When Tiger's Mane heard Yang Qindong say that he would reward the soldiers who performed well with 3 pieces of fatty meat, he was stunned. Then he said, "Young master, Zhaoqing Prefecture was just raided by the Huang army. We did get some gold and silver when we entered the city, but meat is very rare. It would cost a lot to buy it. Why don't we just reward them with silver? You also know that meat is very rare. If that's the case, even if we gave them silver, where would they go to buy it? Okay, go tell Guanyin and General Ma Wei to help us contact pork. It would be best if there was a live pig for sale. We don't lack silver. When the live pig arrives, we can directly bring it to the barracks to stimulate those people." Yang Qindong shook his head with a smile, and then said to Tiger's Mane in an unquestionable tone, "Note, the so-called taboo is to avoid the name and not the surname. For example, there was a Kaiyuan county that was changed to Kaiyuan to avoid Zhu Yuanzhang's name. It was to avoid the yuan in the name Yuanzhang. Everyone, please don't argue about whether the name pig is appropriate or not. Thank you." Since the young master had already thought of everything, Tiger's Mane didn't dare to say anything more. He agreed and left. When he found Guanyin and Ma Wei because of this matter, and at the same time brought in a total of 30,000 silver taels, the two generals were really confused. However, since this matter was requested by the imperial envoy, and he was willing to spend a high price to buy live pigs, how could they refuse? They immediately expressed that they would use their connections to get as many live pigs as possible. The two generals did their best on this matter. Regardless of whether it was because they wanted to curry favor with Yang Qindong, or because they could profit from this matter, large amounts of live pigs were quickly sent to Zhaoqing Prefecture by the rich people in the nearby countryside. They then passed through the city and were transported to the mercenary barracks outside the city. Wang Yong was a member of the Wang family in Zhaoqing Prefecture. The Wang family had once been a large family in the city. Since he was young, he had never lacked food and clothing. He had always carried the hope of the family's revival. However, he had no interest in studying. Instead, he liked to dance with his spear and stick. He had taken many people as his master, and had learned a good set of martial arts. When Zhaoqing Prefecture was surrounded by the Huang bandit army, he had been traveling with some of his Jianghu friends. After he heard the news of Zhaoqing being surrounded, he flew back. However, he was still one step too late. By the time he had secretly snuck back into the city, hundreds of people in the Wang family had all been killed by the Huang bandit army. There were also some clan sisters who had been brutally humiliated by Cheng Yuan and his trusted aides. Chapter 386. The furious Wang Yong once again used the name of the Wang clan. To outsiders, he would always use the name Wang Yong from the Wang clan. He gathered a group of brothers to assassinate small groups of Huang bandit soldiers in the city. Not to mention that his plan was meticulous and his skills were good, he actually managed to kill many Huang bandit soldiers. For a time, Cheng Yuan, who was in the city, was furious. If not for the fact that Yang Qindong and the others arrived outside the city in time and posed a threat to the Zhaoqing manor, Cheng Yuan would have started a large manhunt in the city to find Wang Yong and the others. In the end, Cheng Yuan was captured and the Zhaoqing manor returned to the arms of the southern Ming government. However, there was not a trace of joy on Wang Yong's face. This was because he had already found out that Cheng Yuan was not dead. After being injured, he was imprisoned in the southern Ming army and was waiting to be sent to the capital to be executed. Wang Yong was unwilling that he could not take revenge for his clan by himself. For this matter, he had gone to find the southern Ming soldiers and requested to meet their general. However, how could a person without any official status get what he wanted? Not willing to give up, he saw a large group of pigs heading towards the mercenary camp outside the city. He immediately thought of a plan and chased after the pig delivery team. "I know how to herd pigs. I can help you." The pig delivery team consisted of a squad of Lung Feng, a platoon of auxiliary soldiers, and 100 southern Ming soldiers. Because there were too many pigs, it was difficult for them to herd them. Now that someone was willing to help, they naturally would not refuse. Thus, Wang Yong generously joined the team. Not to mention that his skills were good and his eyes were sharp. Every time the pigs wanted to leave the team, he would be the first to discover them and herd them. This was a great help. After traveling for a few li, the mercenary camp was in front of them. Because of the appearance of these live pigs, the normally heavily guarded military camp relaxed a little. Wang Yong even followed the troops into the military camp. With so many pigs being sent into the camp, the auxiliary soldiers who were training all widened their eyes. When they learned from their instructor that these live pigs would be slaughtered very soon, and that everyone would get a share, and that those who performed well would get 3 extra pieces of fatty meat with their meals, each and every one of them worked even harder to train. Even when teaching them how to read and write, they were much more serious. It had to be said that Yang Qindong's move was indeed effective. After Wang Yong followed the team and sent the pork into the temporary pig house, the platoon leader, Lung Feng, who was following the team, came forward to express his gratitude. He even took out some silver as a reward. This was also the military discipline of the Yang family army. They couldn't casually take a needle or a piece of thread from the common people. As long as there were people who helped them, they had to give a corresponding reward. Of course, Wang Yong wouldn't care about such a small amount of silver. He refused. "Sir, I want to see your general." Captain Lung Feng was stunned when he heard this. He immediately understood that the other party had come for something. He immediately smiled and said, "Brother, seeing that you have a strong body, could it be that you want to join us? If that's the case, you don't have to go see a general. There's a recruitment office not far away. You can go there and register your situation in detail." "No, I'm not here to join the army. I have something to talk to your general about." Wang Yong shook his head and said coldly. To him, the Wang family had been destroyed by the Huang bandits. He had no hope of surviving. Right now, he only wanted to kill Qing Yuan and take revenge. After that, he would be at the mercy of others. For someone who had already thrown his life to the back of his mind, how could he have any interest in joining the army? Seeing that the other party wasn't here to join the army, the platoon leader raised his guard. He lightly raised his arm and made a warning gesture to the other members of the Lung Feng. He then smiled and walked in front of Wang Yong and said, "Brother, if you have something to tell me, it's the same. If it's really important news, I will definitely report it to our officers. Even if there's merit, I won't take it from you." As the platoon leader spoke, the other members of the Lung Feng platoon started to approach Wang Yong. Among them was Peng Yu, who had been allowed to join the Lung Feng platoon as an auxiliary soldier by Yang Chendong. Peng Yu hadn't been in the Lung Feng platoon for long, but his enthusiasm for learning was very high. He quickly learned some of the hand signals used by members of the Lung Feng platoon, and was very familiar with the platoon leader's hand signals. While they were talking, he had already reached Wang Yong's side. After all, he was a martial artist. When someone suddenly approached him, Wang Yong quickly sensed it. Out of instinct, he suddenly charged at the platoon leader and struck out with his elbow. Those who could enter the Lung Feng platoon and become a platoon leader were all elites in the army. Even if their martial arts were average, they weren't easy to injure. Seeing that Wang Yong's attack was incomparably powerful, the platoon leader quickly retreated and dodged the attack. After forcing the platoon leader back with just one attack, Wang Yong quickly turned around and kicked him. Obviously, the attack just now was just a feint. His real target was the people behind him. He wanted to kill his way out before he was surrounded. Wang Yong charged in the direction of Peng Yu. Peng Yu saw the kick coming at him with a whistling sound. At this moment, his comrades didn't quickly form an encirclement. Peng Yu gritted his teeth and raised his right arm to protect his head. After that, he chose to take the attack head-on. Bang! The kick landed with a powerful force on Peng Yu's body. He couldn't help but let out a muffled sound. But then, he suddenly exerted force and pushed the kick away. Then, he quickly threw a punch at Wang Yong's chest. Peng Yu's reaction was fast and his ability to take hits was strong. This greatly exceeded Wang Yong's expectations. He originally thought that the other party was just a small soldier from the Southern Ming Empire. With his methods, he wouldn't even care if there were 3 or 5 of such people. But now, not only did the other party take the attack from his kick, but he was also able to counterattack. In a moment of carelessness, his body was a little slow in dodging, and the punch landed on his ribs. Although he discovered it in time and wasn't seriously injured, he couldn't help but feel a faint pain below his ribs. After knowing that Peng Yu wasn't simple, and from the corner of his eyes, he noticed that the surrounding Ming Empire soldiers were beginning to increase. Wang Yong, who didn't dare to continue fighting, quickly retreated and rushed in another direction where there weren't many people. Wang Yong's vision was accurate, and the direction he chose to break out of the encirclement was correct. It made the platoon leaders feel like they couldn't catch up. If they let him escape from their hands like this, they didn't know how they would be laughed at by their comrades. They immediately chased after him ferociously. Ba Daojiang, who was originally a captive of the Yellow Bandits, was now a temporary auxiliary soldier. At this moment he was sneakily approaching the pig house. Don't think that he wanted to do something bad. He just wanted to see if there was an opportunity to eat the pigs when they were slaughtering them. It would be good even if he could eat a piece of meat. Because he was thinking about the pork, he asked for leave from the platoon leader, and approached the pig house with the excuse that he needed to go to the toilet. Unexpectedly, he didn't see a single pig, but he did see a few humans. When he saw the platoon leaders wearing camouflage uniforms rushing in his direction, he instinctively turned around and wanted to run. After becoming a temporary auxiliary soldier, he naturally knew the story of the platoon leaders. He knew that they were the elites of the elites, and that they had the ability to fight against 100 people by themselves with their firearms. Although he was good at martial arts, how could he fight against advanced firearms? Since he wasn't a match for them, he decided to dodge. He was probably wearing a normal military uniform. Based on his appearance and not his face, no one should know who he was. Now that he saw the platoon leaders rushing in his direction, he naturally turned around and ran. But just as he turned around, he heard a shout behind him. "My comrade, quickly turn around and stop this spy." "Spy? I'm not." When Ba Daojiang heard that he was mistaken for a spy, he quickly shook his head to deny it. In order to clear his name, he turned around and waved his hands. "I'm just greedy for pork and wanted to take advantage of it. I don't have any other intentions. Don't accuse me of anything." Before Wang Yong could finish his sentence, a punch came flying toward his face. Ba Daojiang was standing right in Wang Yong's way. In order to escape, Ba Daojiang had no choice but to take action to clear the obstacle. Who was Ba Daojiang? He was a man of 8 feet, a famous man in the martial arts world. He was a man who once chased his enemy across 8 rivers. How could he allow others to slander him so easily? He was naturally afraid of Lung Feng, but he couldn't let Lung Feng teach him a lesson without even giving him a chance to explain. This was also because he had only been a temporary auxiliary soldier for a short time, so he didn't pay much attention to military discipline. Otherwise, he wouldn't have the courage to fight back. It was precisely because the military discipline was still a little loose that when he saw someone about to attack him, he didn't hesitate to fight back. In the face of Wang Yang's punch, he didn't dodge and met it with his right fist, letting the 2 fists collide in midair. Clang! When the fists collided, blood flowed out from the cracks between their bones. It was obvious that both of them had used a lot of strength in their fists. When the fists collided, Wang Yang's footsteps were blocked, and he was forced to take a step back. Ba Daojiang, who attacked later, was at a disadvantage. Before he could fully unleash his strength, his fists collided with Wang Yang's, and he was forced to take a step back. After both of them took a step back, their eyes were filled with killing intent when they looked at each other. It was as if they were saying, "Brat, you dare to attack me? You're dead meat." Their gazes met for only a moment. Then, without allowing anyone to say anything, the 2 of them began to exchange blows and fight, turning into a ball of fists and feet. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.